actually doesn't loop. It's a dynamic pixel generation system, it looks like, or a particle effect system. Just random. But something I realized. I'm trying to get a GIF of it. I know, right? So damn good. It's only $5 on SoundCloud? No, not SoundCloud. Yeah, SoundCloud. Oh, is this SoundCloud? I think it is. Bandcamp. That was it. Bandcamp. And of course, you can always pick it up on Steam as well. Oh, thank you for the heads up. There we go. Is that a little better? Or is that better, I should say? I'm always worried I'm gonna because it looks like I'm having like the volume set to like 80% for the mic, whereas like my desktop is at like 30%. So I'm always worried I'm gonna be like blasting my voice across, the internet and into your ears to a harmful effect. But that's good. Thank you for the heads up. Oh, stream settings. I can't wait to get a mic arm. That's going to be like the biggest game changer. Well, aside from like a background and all that stuff, but when I move. All right. It is 8 a.m. Oh, I do not have a camera on that one. I thought I had a camera here. Video capture device. Quickly, before it's too late. Good morning. Good morning, drifters and beastmasters. I am Andreas, and we're going to talk today about the Hyperlight Drifter Tabletop RPG. And in addition, we're probably going to play some Hyperlight Drifter afterwards as well. So feel free to stay tuned after that. Or after the tabletop talk, and we'll go right. Am I still? Oh, I'm only half the screen here. Oops. Need to fix that. Oh, yeah, I am the admin of the server as well. I am the. Hi everyone. Let me just start with an introduction then. I am Andreas Walters. I am the founder of MWGLive Games, the creator of the Hyperlight Drifter Tabletop RPG. And I am also the creator of the Baby Bestiary, Caretaker Warlock, and other adorable creations, as well as the Dark Embers of the Forgotten Kingdom. I've done quite a few tabletop RPG products, and Hyperlight Drifter is one of our first standalone titles, and which I am super happy to bring out and bring to life. I'm super glad that Alex gave me this opportunity, and let's dive into the tabletop RPG, shall we? It's better. Okay. Whew. Had me worried there. All right. Well, I can live with that. So, let's dive in. Hyperlight Drifter is a tabletop role-playing game derived from the video game, of course. And the goal of it was, or the goal for me, was to create an experience that builds upon the experience of the Drifter in the video game, as well as provides you the opportunities to explore the greater world of Drifter. Yes, Solar Ash just got announced, which is freaking awesome. And we are in conversations with Alex about how to go forward with that, or if we will be able to create something for Solar Ash or make that part of this Drifter, or would be a separate game altogether. I am not sure. So Solar Ash is still in discussion since the game is still in development. Nevertheless, Hyperlight Drifter is based off of a single D20, and it is very player-focused, where players will make all the rolls, and the narrator, or the game master, is free to craft the story and the encounters, the events that happen, and is less bogged down with difficulty and calculations. So let's hop right into it. Credits, navigation. So I am working on a big rework of a couple systems, and we'll go into those as we get down to them. But for the most part, not much will have changed from this version. So we're going to start with basics of tabletop RPGs. Hold on, let me unhide my chat so I can actually see this. Yeah. So 4th edition, yes, is a big inspiration for me. 4th edition, a big inspiration. It was one of the large contributors to ideas. So for the combat board, Ryutama and 4th edition are actually one of my major inspirations going into that. And Ryutama is a constrained combat space where there's a front line and a back line, and the enemies have a front line and a back line. 4th edition, as you know, is a extremely tactical grid combat system, more fleshed out than, say, 5th edition, 3rd edition, other versions of D&D. And so I looked at D&D 4th edition for its abilities and its ability implementations. And that's where a lot of the inspiration from 4th edition came from, was looking at how abilities interacted with the tile set. Because I think that it did very well with that. There's other issues with 4th edition, but it did tile-based combat very well. And so there was a lot that I could learn from 4th edition by diving into that. And also, to apologies, my second screen is over here, and I'll be looking over there when I see comments and stuff pop up. So we're going to start with getting started. Basics of tabletop role-playing game, safety tools, so on forth. Character creation, classes. We'll go over the disciplines, equipment, advancement, and the subsystems that are in the game, such as intervention points, woe, corruption, downtime, exploration, combat, and then other advanced options. So let's get into this. Patch notes. Patch notes is a thing I'm hugely in favor of. It's very much a video game-me-like thing. However, I feel like it's beneficial, especially while we're in the playtest phase of the game, to put down my thoughts and justifications for why we're changing mechanics the way they are, or the direction that I'm pushing the game into, such as downtime activities, advanced options, updating enemies and consequences, fixing the character sheet. The character sheet is actually undergoing one more major change, and so we'll get into that as we hit abilities and classes. And then clarifications as well for characters. So, Hyperlight Drifter. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the game. It is a beautiful one, and I highly recommend you play it. I believe it is on sale on the Switch. But the gist of the game is that a sundering happened. A caustic event, a global event happened, to which the world as was previously known is destroyed. And from that, you are one of the survivors, or your character is one of the survivors in this new world, and you are left in the ruins of this was once technologically advanced civilization. A best way to describe it is like mutually assured destruction, in the sense that society does not operate at the capacity. Even though culture is destroyed now, like we may see, if society fell apart today, we would know how to operate an iPad, but we wouldn't know how to create one. Would be the best kind of parallel to how the relationship to technology might be. In addition, Horizon Zero Dawn is actually another great example of survivorship. Yes, so the drifter in the video game is, I would say, charged. He seems to have a deliberate goal of reaching the cell at the bottom of the game, and the reasons why are unclear. And part of that is you can see it literally or almost alliteratively, or like narratively. So in one hand, he is destroying the cell to destroy judgment, and on the other hand, it is a journey of his mortality. Or the dog is helping him guide him to destroy the cell. There's a lot of interpretations into the community of what he is doing and why he is doing it. In addition, some of our mechanics based on the drifter's sickness, such as corruption, you'll see tied into that. There are some expansions that were going on, in expansions in terms of expanding content, expanding our rule set to include things such as the dog, or other guiding beings, as you saw in Solar Ash Kingdom and the otherworldly Red Realm. So there's a lot to go into, but I guess to say it simply, Drifter is a very personal journey, and it is through a world that is broken and full of lost technologies and mutated creatures, corruption and death. Corruption as in a sickness, not corruption as in people being corrupted. And these people are all spread out through small sanctuaries throughout the realm. So, echoes of a dark and violent past resonate across a torn and sundered landscape. Venturing outside the sanctuary reveals a savage land steeped in ancient lore, blood of the unlucky, and treasures of old. Around every corner lurks danger, from the vicious and warped creatures that will feast on your flesh to the hidden hazards that will crush the frail bodies of the unwary. You are a drifter, one who ventures into the ancient ruins, collecting forgotten knowledge, lost technologies, and broken histories. And from that, you and your friends, as drifters, will venture out, collecting technology, discovering lost lore, connecting communities, and telling your stories as drifters. Tabletop RPGs. I don't know how many of you are familiar with tabletop RPGs. Tabletop role-playing games are like board games with a lot more narrative control, or like video games with a lot more player agency and freedom. You're allowed to do whatever you want to do, assuming it's kosher with all your friends. And so you and your friends gather together and tell an interesting story. One of these people will be the game master or narrator, and the rest of you will be players or characters or drifters in this sense in the world. The world of Drifter is full of a bunch of anthropomorphic animals, or these are bird folk, cat folk, raccoon folk, otter folk, and then the humanoid blues. Hey, Daniel, how you doing? Asians Rep, how you doing? And so outside of the relative safety of these sanctuaries lies a vast unknown world. The scars of the past only just beginning to heal. You are a drifter, or one who chooses to leave the safety of the sanctuaries to seek out useful knowledge, answers, and technology. And this is an open-ended goal depending on what you want to seek. If you want to go out and collect stories or decipher the stories of the past, and then bring them back or collect them. If you want to make areas safe again, such as pushing back warped creatures or bringing back civilization from, or expanding your sanctuaries. There's a lot that you can do, from connecting sanctuaries, resolving issues between sanctuaries, and you're free to go out into this world and act as you see fit. In addition, then you can also try even doing your own Hyperlight Drifter-esque, not scenario, but story where you are also dying of some disease. You are have a sickness of some degree, same as the Drifter, and you are trying to stop the cell in some way or capacity. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. What you need, friends. Obviously, being able to play with people is really cool. I will be working on a GM-less version of Drifter as well. There's probably going to be a couple of mechanics tweaks to that, such as how abilities work, but I'll get into those once I'm done with the core game rules. Time and place. Obviously, you got to meet with your friends. There's a bunch of resources out there on the internet. I've listed quite a few of them. You're free to play online in person. Dice, only use a D20. Character sheets, you can use an Excel spreadsheet. We actually have a great community character sheet that's going around. It's in our Discord, as well as the PDF ones that we provide on our website. Tokens, if you're in person, there are a lot of things to track in Drifter. Well, a lot might be depending on who you talk to, but things like health, energy, intervention points, these are all things that are more easily tracked in physical mediums sometimes. So it's easier. I mean, health you could probably just record on paper, but things like energy, where you're using energy a lot, or your intervention points where you're passing it, taking it, it's a lot easier to use in a physical medium. So you can just like grab it, push it aside, move it around, and obviously something to take notes with. Session 0, always highly recommended for any game you play, regardless. And that's more of a way to figure out what kind of game does everyone want to play? What kind of characters does everyone want to play? What kind of stories are we looking to tell? Are we looking at trying to do a gritty survival game? Are we trying, such as, I guess a great way of showing it would be like, you have D&D high fantasy and you have Darkest Dungeon. You have very polar ideas of how a game is, and then you can even explore darker topics within each of those, or lighter topics. So the idea is to kind of understand what game everyone wants to play, and what people's sort of off-limits topics are, for things they don't want to explore or are sensitive to. And we want to be respectful of those sensitivities as well. And so there are tools such as the X card, Lines and Veils, and there are a few others as well. Other things, talk at the table, what kind of stuff are allowed at the table, what, like drinking, smoking, if your group does that. It's kind of good just to know who's paying for pizza. Also important, I know back in my high school, we always had we ordered food in every so often. So it's always good to know when stuff happens or come to a consensus before it happens. And then create characters. Of course, the best part. Or at least one of the funnest parts of tabletop RPGs. So we've got character bonds, character aspirations. These will probably be developed more into character creation as we move into the full game. And these things are... Yes, the book will be a landscape format. So it's going to be 8.5 by 11 so far, landscape. And so it'll open nice and wide, lay flat, be a beautiful art book. And both the setting book and the core book will be landscape. I'm probably going to do any softcover prints to landscape as well. So when creating your characters, obviously try to figure out best ways to connect them, even just little ways, in terms of like, we met each other in the forest, or I helped save him from some dirks, and that's how they met up, common goals. These are little things that help build characters together, and those little relationships definitely help when starting to roleplay. So let's go over some of the basic mechanics. If you're coming from D&D, this might be a little difficult to wrap your head around. I mean, not difficult, it would not be the right way, but it's very different from D&D in the sense that how everything is structured. So let's get into it. So energy pool. This, like video games, like Hyper Light Drifter, you have energy. If you're familiar with the Cypher system or Numenera, this would be akin to your pools. You have a set of energy, an energy bar, in which you can spend to perform actions. You recover them on long rests, as well as there are actions that you can use to recover energy as well. You do not recover energy on a round basis, so every time we change the scene, you would just recover energy, which makes it nice and easy. And then if you run out of energy, you can start running into problems, what we call energy debt. It's a slightly crunchier thing, still fiddling with it. But if you run out of energy, you start running into problems. So you don't want to run out of energy. You can spend your energy in various ways, such as boosting your rolls and obviously performing actions. Once you roll, you compare your result against a threshold. There are 5 thresholds in the game, there are 5 disciplines in the game, and there are 2 thresholds. Essentially, there's a low and a high. The low is judgment, so if you roll that number or below, you get a judgment. And if you roll that number or higher, you get a you roll the high number, fortune. If you roll that number or higher, you get a fortune result. And the number in between is considered temperance. Your skills are broken out into categories, which we call disciplines, and each discipline has a fortune and a judgment threshold. So your combat might have a very low threshold for fortune, which means that you are more likely to fully succeed with those actions that you perform. Whereas if you have a high judgment, you are more likely to receive complications, or as we call it, full consequence. So you still perform the action, and it will still happen, just more bad stuff or more, not necessarily damage, but more things can happen that get in your way. Discipline, boost scores. This is more relevant when we start talking about spending energy. These are 2 stats where when you spend energy to increase your roll, this score will tell you how much each point of energy adds to your roll. So for example, taking a step back, if you roll a d20 and roll a 8, and the judgment threshold is 9, and you just need to get above a 9, your boost score would say how many points of energy you spent. So every 1 point of energy, that boost score will add that much. So if I have a boost score of 2 and I rolled an 8, 1 point of energy would increase my roll by 2. So 1 point of energy would make it to 10, and then 2 points of energy would put it to 12. So I can spend as much energy as I want to get out of the judgment, or even push it all the way to fortune, depending on how much energy you want to spend. So there's a free amount of openness. As a character, you're free to choose what you expend your resources on to succeed. This would be very familiar to those in the Cypher system, where you have a level you need to get to, and you're trying to... Well, Cypher System's a little different because you can only get 2 assets or boost yourself twice with then 2 reduction. But yeah, so you have you use your energy to boost scores, as well as some actions will cost energy as well. So you have to be very careful in how you spend your energy. Action costs. Some actions will cost energy, some will cost dash, some will cost woe. Woe is a sort of social, well, it's like a stress mechanic in the sense, or stress or bad luck. Dashes will fully utilize your dash module, and energy will use your energy. Let me just read this one comment from AM Mimic. Fori also had issues with how long it takes to get through combat with all the modifiers. Will you be taking that into consideration? There is actually not very many modifiers in Drifter. The only thing, there's only a few abilities that will actually provide characters with a direct bonus to their rolls. Outside of that, it more solely relies on your energy usage and energy reduction. So as you advance past the first advancements, because we don't call them levels, we call them advancement paths. So as you start acquiring advancements, you will start gaining ability scores. And those ability scores will reduce the cost of actions. So if say, for example, Cleave costs 2 energy. Well, if I have a might of 1, that will reduce, so essentially strength 1, that will reduce the cost by 1. And so I only have to pay 1 energy instead of the 2. Now, the main caveat with ability scores is it can only be applied once per round. So I can't do Cleave twice or Cleave and boost and reduce every expenditure. It's only from the first expenditure of that round. So if there's something you want to do, so there's a couple interesting things that we want to highlight for actions in Drifter. First, if there's something you want to do in your character, when there is something that your character wants to say or do, describe it to the narrator in the group. This can be the description of the action or just the outcome you're looking to achieve. If this action requires skill or effort to pull off, or even if the outcome can lead to an interesting result, the narrator may ask you to spend some energy or make the effect simply happen. So how this works is this is mostly as a need to get out of the role of needless rolling. If there's something that you want to do and it can easily be done, why bother rolling? It just happens. If there is something that you want to do, but it's not really a risky thing to do, the narrator could just say you can spend 1 energy or 2 energy and it will happen. And then the third option would be you can just roll to see what happens. And this is primarily about the interesting result. Lifting a heavy grate isn't necessarily a rolling worthy action. Sure, it could be interesting as something to put in the way of the characters, but it's not really a major roadblock. So if you said it costs 2 energy to lift this heavy grate, some players who are energy conservative would rather try to find another way around it. This might be pick a lock or find a console to try and get around. Now, if they roll for the console, something interesting can happen because they can find something unexpected, they can trigger an alarm. Whereas lifting the grate or forcing open the doors doesn't quite have an interesting mechanic. Oh, I think it just got quiet. The music's still in the background, at least for me. Of course, I'm trying to use my mouse that's unplugged. Let me see. Is that a little better? So the idea here is that if there's something you want to do, if it's not that complicated, it happens. If it's sort of complicated, the narrator can kind of either choose between just spend some energy and make it happen, or the players can make a roll to see what happens. And the see what happens really comes down to, will something interesting come from this? Will something interesting come from the failure of this? because otherwise there's no need to roll if nothing interesting will come of it. So back to action cost. Actions cost 1 to 2 energy, usually. This is more of a standardization of costs. And the reason for that is we don't want the risk of taking the action to be prohibitive. So what you will find is with the 3 thresholds, actions, there are 3 potential outcomes to actions. If you don't get a fortune, there are consequences associated with those actions. So what we do instead is we increase the risk to higher output abilities. So instead of a standard reduction in the consequence, we can increase it for higher risk actions instead of increasing the energy cost. Mechanically, what that does is it reduces the upfront risk for the player, and that gives them the choice to increase their energy usage later. So I don't want to spend 5 energy for a kick-ass ability and miss, but I would rather spend 2 energy for a risky kick-ass ability and choose to spend energy for that. And I'm probably getting way into the weeds of game design philosophy, but I think it's a very important distinction to make, especially for new designers or other designers watching, as well as just as a narrator or person who wants to hack the system at some point. Using the lever of increasing the risk for actions, I think, is a far better one than increasing the energy cost. Perhaps at higher levels, having a higher energy cost, but for the most part, we're not looking at late game mechanics here, as we want to ensure that the core of the game is solid before pushing into the late game. Later, as you advance, you gain ability scores, and these ability scores will reduce the cost of actions: grit, agility, insight, and presence. So you have your strength score, your dexterity score, your wisdom score, and your charisma score. As you gain ability scores, they will reduce the cost of your actions, but can only be applied once per round. These start at 0 when you create your character. And I wish there was a way to do a more interactive character sheet, where these show up after you advance, but there's no real way to do that on a video game. So making your roll. There are 3 results depending on your stance in the against those 2 threshold points. And then if you don't like your result, you can spend energy to boost your roll. Now there are 2 boost scores: grit and nerve. Grit covers physical actions, which cover all abilities that would technically use might and agility. And then nerve would cover your mental actions, which would cover presence and insight. So if you're performing a physical action and you need to boost your score, you would use your grit score. So most classes are set up as a 1-2 setup. So for fighters, grit would be 2, nerve would be 1. For wielders, their nerve would be 2, and their grit would be 1. And then other classes are flexible in terms of letting you choose what goes up and which one's a 2 and which one's a 1. Consequences. The biggest thing here is that abilities are. The biggest thing is that fortune does not receive a consequence, and judgment and temperance results do. Now, every action you perform will be against an adversity level, or there will be an adversity level related to it. And this is the severity of the consequence that will happen when you perform that action. So, for instance, creatures will have an adversity level, and that just determines, you can almost raw convert it to damage. Adversity level 2 will deal 2 damage, and adversity level 3 will do 3 damage, and adversity level 5 will do 5 damage. It's very linear in that sense. In addition, there are sub-effects as well that you can break down, such as summoning allies or narrative impacts that can happen. So every action will have an adversity level, and your result. So if you get a temperance, it is 1, usually the adversity level -1. And then the judgment is the full adversity level. So if I attack an enemy or defend against an enemy that's a adversity level 5, and I get a judgment, I would be taking that full 5 damage. But if I get a temperance, it would reduce it usually by 1. So then I would be taking 4 damage. And that's just using the damage as a benchmark for simplicity. There are other mechanical effects that can happen, such as stunning, pushing, forced movement, and stuff like that, that are modifiers that can be used in lieu of damage. And then, of course, the narrator isn't the only one that's stuck with thinking of what consequences to actions are. If you fail to find the trigger for like opening this gate or finding the control, and you get a judgment or temperance, feel free to pitch an idea. Like the narrator, the idea is that the narrator doesn't have to be everything, or have to be the god of everything. You're free to collaborate in that sense. And then failing forward. This is a huge part, as the judgment result, although it is a failure, you still succeed in accomplishing your task. This isn't a binary, whereas in D&D, if you don't make the skill check, you fail. You don't succeed in that action. In Drifter, if you get a judgment result, you might not necessarily succeed, but the idea is it moves the narrative forward. So, for instance, if we were trying to push the button to make something happen, and we failed in pushing the button, we got a judgment. I keep wanting to say fortune. If we get a judgment result in pushing the big red button, it's not that we failed to push the button, it's that we pushed the button and something else happened. Or something else happened while we pushed the button, or we got in. There's a lot of things that can happen during the success of that action. But the success may be minimized. But the events at hand will still continue to move forward. Intervention points. So this is the last control a player has in terms of controlling the events at hand. And this is so if you really don't like your role, you can spend an intervention point. Intervention points are a shared community resource that players can use to boost their role, one category. Because no matter what your result is when you roll, it will fall into one of the thresholds or it'll fall into one of the results of fortune, judgment, and temperance. So no matter what, you can always boost it up one. So if you rolled a 2, which would be terrible, you could spend an intervention point to just bump it up to a temperance. Now, you can't spend energy after you bump it up, but you could spend energy to bump it up to a temperance, then spend an intervention point to boost it to a fortune, which I should probably make that clarification. Now, the only way to get intervention points is really by rolling a 20 or a 1, or there is the players can reward each other, the narrator or the players, for call-outs, something sort of like a, what's it called? I think I used the term, a community reward. So if you guys think that your player made an excellent role-playing opportunity or role-playing moment, played really well in character, or did some act that was, selfless, or something worthy of reward that you would like to have noticed, elect that person and see if the group agrees, and grant an intervention point to the table. Also, some abilities leverage intervention points. Every class has a ability that uses an intervention point. So there are other uses aside from just boosting your roll. Typically, when you start out, there's one for each player. or just the number of people at the table. And some games that I've had use them up really quickly, and other games, they amass quite a few of them. So it kind of just depends on the cadence of the group. Drank like a half a cup of coffee, and now I'm like thirsty. All right. So there are four, at the moment, there are 4 classes. But I am working on a 5th, and the reason for that is they're going to map specifically to each of the disciplines or the skills, which we're going to actually get into. So, things to do in Drifter. There are 5 disciplines, and we sort of map the things you can do to those disciplines. So, discover and explore. There are secrets to this realm, discovering and understanding remnant technology, finding another sanctuary, to discovering a quiet, serene view. Through all the bloodshed and death, there are still nice things to experience in this world. And something that I want to take a huge focus on is there are nice things to experience in this world. In Drifter, Drifter is set up as a hex crawl in a sense, and what we're doing is in it we're placing discoveries as a mechanical reward. There are places in the world that you can discover, and they will provide your character with benefits. There are things, so you might recover a point of corruption by discovering or resting at this discovery. There are, in our setting book, we're setting up a number of discoveries that throughout each region there are nice things that you can find. And these might be unexpected or they might be planned on the map, depending on your narrator and the map itself. So, traverse and survive. Sanctuaries are mostly isolated, with only a few being connected to nearby sanctuaries and homesteads. Drifters make excellent wayfinders and can connect these distant communities. Perhaps there is a chance that the world can be made safe again. This kind of reminds me of Postman, an old classic movie. But the idea is after civilization falls, people become isolated into their niches. And the idea that there are some individuals who will go out into the world and connect them. Connect them either like by visiting and just showing that the world is connected and there are other people out there. And there's stories you can tell with like hope and community and stuff like that. Defend and combat. The world is a dangerous place and many things lurk deep in the wilderness and in the ruins. Your skill in battle will be the difference between life and death. Although fighting may be inevitable, it doesn't always have to be a solution to every problem. The main highlight here is combat doesn't have to solve everything. You can sneak past things. You could theoretically play a game of Drifter where you're not fighting things. And I want to be very open to that possibility and that style of play. Communicate and socialize. From sanctuary residents, elders, intelligent creatures, sentient AIs, to friendly travelers and bandits. I don't know if they're friendly bandits, but we'll find out. There is a colorful array of characters for your drifters to interact with. Some may have the best of intentions, and others may have with malicious ends. It will be up to you to forge your own alliances and find a new path, for better or for worse. And rebuild and manipulate. Amidst the ruins of civilization, there are a lot of technology that remains functional and usable. Most are just afraid to try. Although its purpose and function may be unknown, these engines and materials can be utilized in creative and unique ways, causing vast destruction or helping to build civilization. The choice is yours to make. So, as a character, again, the disciplines are exploration, survival, combat, social, and manipulate. And the separation I make for exploration and survival is exploration and traversal skills, whereas survival is camping and navigation skills. And we'll get to the soft skill lists in a bit. Things to keep track of, obviously your health and your energy. Run out of health, you die. It gets a little more complicated with dying, but we'll get into that in a bit. Energy, run out of energy, you'll probably fall unconscious. Woe is, as drifters traverse the darkness, fear, uncertainty, stress, and bad luck build up. This is referred to as woe. Much like taking health damage in combat, you will take on points of woe in social and stressful situations. Some abilities will allow you to take on a point of woe to enact a particular outcome. And then when your woe dial fills up, your metal is tested. And this is very much like Darkest Dungeon, but far more forgiving. So when you fill up on woe, you are tested. And the result of your being tested will determine what boon or burden your character takes on as a trait. And then these have a mechanical benefit and drawback, and they can be usually resolved the next time you spend downtime activities. Usually. It depends on what you get and what we'll go into boons and burdens in a bit. Hey, Asians Rep. I'm super excited for this game and can't wait to buy a copy. Have to drop out for now. Bye. All right, see you later, Daniel. Have yourself a wonderful afternoon. All right, dashes. Dashes are a useful bit of technology at your disposal, allowing you to quickly dart around the battlefield. Your dash module allows you to evade attacks and make super effective ones. And dashes refresh after every encounter and scene. So dashes are interesting because it's one of the ingrained mechanics of Hyper Light Drifter, both as the game and both in the Tabletop RPG. In the game, in the Tabletop RPG, we looked at emulating this as a charge special item. And so every drifter gets 2 charges. There is a opportunity to increase that, but it's expensive. And you can use your dash module to 1, evade damage and move a tile, or 2, move 2 tiles. And so evading damage is obviously a reaction, so you can spend that whenever. So if you roll, if someone's attacking you and you roll a defense of 1, you can spend a dash to completely not negate all damage. I might change that, but right now I'm really liking how it feels. Or you can use it for traversal, so you would use it as an action to move several tiles. In addition, we have abilities that leverage dashes as well. They're sort of like the piercing strike. We have a deflection. So there's a bunch of abilities that you can use on your action or reaction, depending on what it is, that are sort of empowered with the dash module. And because the dash module is limited, these abilities are powerful, but you can only use them twice in an encounter. So, and then the part about using them per scene is... So scene is a vague way of putting a wrapper of time. It's sort of like a short rest, or per short or long rest, how we want to just break up events in the narrative, the story, or the actions at hand. If you're exploring and you fail a traversal skill, and you're about to take maybe like 6 damage or something like that, and you really don't want to take that damage, you could technically spend a dash to evade that damage. I haven't hard-coded it in the sense that you can't use your dash modules outside of combat. So you can use it. However, when you do, your dashes don't refresh until you change the scene again. And this is just... It's a weird mechanic to prevent abuse of the dash module outside of combat to evade environmental damage. Hey, AJ, how you doing today? So that is dash modules, and then intervention points. Intervention points can be gained from community rewards. There's another way of gaining intervention points that I forgot to mention, which is downgrading your result. This one I don't see as much use of, but I have seen it been used. And that's where, if you got a fortune result, you can choose to downgrade it to a temperance to gain a intervention point for the table. So if you're running low on intervention points, you can gain intervention points not just by terribly or awesomely rolling. You can also gain it by willfully suffering at the hands of the narrative. And then corruption. Many drifters who delve into the unknown have been afflicted or succumbed to corruption. This is a condition that will continue to play a bigger role in your character's career until their final moments. Once you reach the final stage of corruption, you have the ability to do a last moment when you find it appropriate, leaving your lasting mark as a drifter. So corruption is sort of a campaign timeline for your character. Let's see. Character sheet. Okay. So this is one of the last versions of the character sheet, but it's great to go over. So here we go. My mouse doesn't work because I have only two USB ports. So name, species, class, traits, knack, about, findings, gear, cool, health, energy. So corruption. So as you gain points of corruption, you will slowly start dying in a sense. Your drifter's sickness will get worse. This has no direct mechanical impact to how your character performs, as the drifter is still able to be a complete badass even till his final moments. And so we don't want to hinder you. The corruption markers will actually be more of an indicator for the narrator and as you as a player to break up visually the career of your character. Once you fill up corruption, you essentially will die. Or you can retire your character in whichever way you feel is narratively appropriate or for your game and for your character. The way you gain corruption can be through various means. Typically, this is through exploring corrupted ruins, fighting corrupted creatures, as well as a couple other narrative elements that could happen. Or dying, actually. So we'll go into it when we get to corruption, but even though you hit 0 hit points, you do not technically die. You will gain a point of corruption. And then at the end, when you reach your final corruption point, then you will truly retire your character. And this puts a soft limit on the campaign, as well as your character. Dashes, as you see, we have more than 2. I don't have a visual way to hide these, so it's going to be 3 for now. Woe, right now it's not a dial because I cannot figure out how to implement a dial in Adobe Acrobat, so in PDFs, so that's always fun. Your judgment thresholds and your fortune thresholds for each discipline, your boost attributes, and then your ability scores, which start at 0 when you start. Your ingredients, components, your advancement track. And I am redoing all of this for the next version. So right now, actually here, let me show it off. I think I have desktop view on. So InDesign. But so as I wait for InDesign to boot up, we'll get into character creation. So now that we kind of explained the mechanics and how things work, let's go into what your characters are and how they'll fit into the world of Drifter. So pick a species, pick your qualities, your traits, your knacks, your quirks. Hey, come back here. Choose your class, your talents, your equipment, and and then figure out your disciplines. Obviously, you can mix up the order of these as you see fit, but I'll probably mix it up anyways for version 3 just for the change in our talent system. Adobe. There we go. Let's go to... Now let's take a look under the hood. So right now, this is the current draft of the character sheet. I am missing links. View. Let's put this into a hub. No, I do not want to look at the playtest. View, fit, spread, and window. All right, and then bleed. So, rearranged. This is placeholder, work in progress, trademark. So a lot is going to change, but here is the new design that I'm currently working on. It's a bigger page, and part of that is for how we're going to be working with our abilities. So name, species, traits, class, health and energy, your woe tracker, your dash tracker, your disciplines, your advancement, your talents and list features, your corruption, your boons and burdens, and then a section for your talents, your dash talents, your 4 regular talents, and your passive. And then, of course, your findings and gear. I'll probably change this up again because there's some discussions about abilities and upgrades. But we'll get into that as we get there. The species of Drifter. In Drifter, there are no racial stats. There are no abilities directly tied to what creature or form you take. So birdfolk, blues, canafolk, felafolk, frogfolk, lizardfolk, otterfolk, raccoonfolk, the sentients, or squirrelfolk. So you can be pretty much anything you want to be or look like. There's not terribly too much mechanically that goes in along with that, and we want that to allow you to tell the stories you want to tell. Obviously, as a sentient, your shape is familiar, though unlike any other species, you are a machine that has been awakened or created after the destruction. A walking artifact, you are a frightful sight to organic eyes and a grim reminder of the horrors that continue to dwell beneath the earth. Sentience and blues are kind of unique. Blues is, we might be changing that name based on discussions with Alex, so we'll see if that stays or if it changes. As you know, the Drifter's skin is blue, so that was just a natural name to provide it, but we're in discussions with how we're going to break that up or change it to be more canonically friendly. So discussions are about that, so that might change. And then all the other species that you have likely encountered in Drifter and Hyperlight Drifter, you are free to play them. Since none of them are inherently evil or inherently good, they're all human, with what their capabilities. At the end of the day, each species is made of flesh and blood, except for the automata, and are capable of the same acts of kindness, compassion, and evil as anyone else. So from that, we have our traits. Your traits are a sort of a skill boon, which allow you to roll. They reduce your threshold for certain skills. These are, again, soft skills, but they're recommended because you're probably likely going to engage with them. So directional memory, animal friend, grounded, iron stomach, natural swimmer, padfoot, tumbler, and these are all relatively like class or species like in a sense, but these could be applied to any body or any background. KNACKS, these are, you have always been a drifter, you had a different life once, and you were likely a master of that craft. I'm always reminded by Morrowind, in the sense that you pick your profession, the letter preceded, you were born under a certain sign, and what may that be? So, academic, you know how to read and write, and you can create written works. A brewer, you're good at cooking. Crafting, you're good at crafting. Cooking, you're good at different cooking. Brewing, obviously, is different cooking as well. Healing, trading, thieving, so we'll be increasing the number of these for the final game. And these are a mechanical boon that ties to your resource use and your boost score. So, for instance, a number of works equal to your 1+ nerve. When forging, you can harvest ingredients to yield, increase the yield of your efforts by 1+ nerve. So, if you are a wielder, your nerve is technically 2. So you would get 3. So you might actually collect 5. So I'll have to revisit these. I might have to get rid of the 1+, but as so far, since everyone will get 1 or 2, so. But overall, I'm going to be leveraging the boost score, since those will always be positive and always be greater than 1. And there will be special actions that you can do with them, such as, healing. You can spend an ingredient to reduce the success and judgment thresholds by 1. This can be done after your roll. So if you're doing a heal check and you really want to succeed, you can spend a bunch of ingredients to succeed, and instead of spending your energy. Traps, same thing. You can use traps. You can use components to succeed on traps. And then thieving would be reducing the threshold as well. Your quirks. This is one unique thing, essentially. So this is trying a way to build out your character by giving it something interesting and unique. This actually is sort of a curated list from our non-player cards product, where you're accompanied by a companion, a mentor. You have an appearance. You have an artificial missing limb. Bears heraldry. Your unique demeanor. Your eyes are unique. Your age, marks, scent, stature, style, something that is unique or interesting about your character. And into the classes. So, classes, I'll just hang out on this screen for now. What we did with the classes is we put each class represents a discipline. So there is a combat class, there is a manipulate class, there is a survival class, there is an exploration class, and there is a social class. And there's a reason for that, because every class gets an ability that leverages their let me start over. Each class has the ability to help other people with their specialized discipline. So a warrior can spend their energy to help their party members do combat skills. The bard, the social class, it's not a bard, trust me, it's not a bard. The versifier can spend its energy to help its classmates or its party with social skills. The delver can help their class with survival skills. And so it breaks along those lines, because that way each class is specialized, but can also help everyone else. All right, so what's in a class? Health and energy pools. So we give you starting value. We give you your starting boost scores and ability scores, which all start at 0. Your disciplines, we provide you with a template to start for your disciplines. Class features, equipment, and talents. Abilities will be broken down by ability name, the cost, the recommended skill, and the range. Skills sort of roll up into disciplines through logical extrapolation, and we'll go into the discipline skill list next after this section. Because I'm still putting it in. That will actually... So the Trailblazer didn't have art because originally when I created it, we only had the 4 classes, and the Delver was able to choose their specialized discipline between survival and exploration. And so this is more of a recent development in me committing to the Trailblazer trademark, probably changing that name, still figuring out what that might be or what that will be. And so the Trailblazer is sort of a recent committal on that design philosophy, because I was sort of torn between the idea that the 4 classes is nice, it's solid, it provides options. It also makes the Delver unique in the sense where it could choose between survival and exploration, and it was an interesting mechanical difference. Yeah, and I might be doing that. Yeah, definitely might be calling it a scout or a ranger or something like that. Ranger more likely, or something like that. Scout also sounds really good, to be honest. And yeah, so it was more of a recent development where I considered bringing that class into light, because honestly, not all groups, or a lot of groups, are more than 4 people, and what class do you double up on? And it would in the end, it would likely be another fighter, another wielder, or if people wanted to make the party even, they would have to pick another delver. And so by separating the delver into the ranger / scout, I think provides a more rational choice for players who want to have each unique class. Because although 4 classes, yeah, that's one of those recent developments, and that's why it doesn't have art, because it was something I was mulling about quite a bit, whether or not to break out the delver or not. So, equipment, talents, class features, disciplines, ability breakdown. So, I'm actually redoing this section because talents are changing quite a bit. Or how we're giving talents to players are changing quite a bit. So, abilities, ability name, cost, skill, range, effect, and then what happens at your different thresholds. Your temperance threshold, as you can see, are usually marked by the star. This is the consequence level, or the adversity level, and then the modifier to that if you get that result. So most temperances are adversity level -1. So warrior. Health 12, energy 10, grit 2, nerve 1, 2 dashes, as everyone has. They have tactician, and also to apologize for the weird spacing on some of the things I'm doing for layout. I'm trying an enforced line manager, so this is why all lines line up. However, that becomes a big pain in the ass when it comes down to laying out other things that don't follow this rigid structure. So I'm still tweaking and messing with that, and mostly just wanted to get these for quick formatting. And obviously they were not very quick because it was a pain in the butt to start messing with. So, but they will be fixed as we move forward. So the warrior features is tactician and stronger together. Tactician is their intervention ability, which allows them to... Oh yeah, totally. AJ says the warrior seems to be like the drifter from the video game most linearly, and very much so. I mean, mostly fights with a sword, and has a grenade. So very much like the warrior, and also because drifter is the fighting. Yeah, it's the archetype. So the tactician is the intervention point ability, and what that does is allows them to pick 2 characters and change their initiative order. And in addition to that, you suffer no consequences from the first action you perform. So if you roll a judgment, you still deal some damage. Nothing bad happens to you. And this is sort of like a improved initiative sort of ability, where like in a boss fight, we want to move first, or we want to get these certain abilities off, or actions off, or positioning. The tactician would be, and what I might do is change this around so it can be used in combat as well. So yeah, like before the start of combat or the start of a round. So once everyone goes, the warrior could spend a intervention point and mix up the initiative order of everyone. Stronger together. This is your assisting or your discipline helpful ability, and this allows you to spend energy to help boost your allies. And this spends your energy at your boost value. So obviously you have 2 grit instead of 1, like instead of the wielder's 1 grit. So you can spend your 1 energy and increase their roll by 2. Actually, what class would you say is the archetype of the video game drifter? Honestly, probably warrior. That sort of is Yeah, warrior. Most of that is because of the just straight combat. They don't get into exploration at all. They don't get into social at all. And why is someone with a hose hosing off? 1 second, let me close my door. Because, of course, now is the perfect time to power wash the concrete. Oh, the joys, the joys. All right, so I'll get to that. And then we have a bunch of talents that are warrior specific, and you get to pick a equipment kit. This is kind of like D&D in the sense where it's like starting equipment, but also we can just give you bits that you can spend on stuff. There's a couple of different variants of these, like the bulwark, shield, weapon, armor, the brute, 2 weapons, and a heavy weapon. And then we have abilities. So in Drifter version 4.3, the next version, I'm actually going to be revamping abilities. Part of that is we're changing to a slotting mechanic. So I'm just going to go over that briefly. So the slotting mechanic, so you will get a number of abilities that you get to pick from a diverse skill list. So we're going to pool all the abilities and separate them out by discipline. Separate them out by discipline. Then your character can pick any abilities from that list and choose to slot abilities. The warrior, because combat is their specialized discipline, will be able to slot as many combat abilities as they see fit. But in the counter to that is that he can only slot up to 2 of any other discipline. So he technically doesn't have to slot any combat disciplines because, 2, 4, 6. So he could slot manipulate, social, exploration, 2 of each, and actually be full. But he can slot 3 combat talents if he so chooses. He can slot a combat dash talent, a combat passive, and 2 other combat regular action talents. So you are unrestricted in how many of your favorite discipline that you can slot. So we're going to have probably, I'm going to say pick, at least to start, I'm probably going to have you pick 4, or have new characters pick 4 abilities and 1 dash talent. And from there, they would normally just slot all of them because you have all the slots. A passive would be an ability in that sense. And so you could choose to have 3 abilities and 1 passive for starting out. But so like all of these, for example, would be combat talents. Currently, the idea was you can pick 3 of these and you would just have them. This is very much akin to like how the Cypher system worked. And the problem I have with that is there's no strategic choice with abilities. So in Drifter, I want the abilities that you choose to be somewhat strategically or meaningful choices. And so the abilities that you slot will then be more meaningful, and you will know what you can do at all times because you have 5 things you can really do. You have your dash abilities, you have your 2 uses of your dash ability and your special dash, and then you have your 4 talents, and then your passive, whatever that may be. And so, like as you see, the passive power, the beginning of a scene or combat encounter, you take on a fighting style, power +1 to damage, +2 defense rolls, +2. And this is about as complicated as it gets for bonuses. Sorry, I'm doing a lot of spinning. And then like actions, cleave fortune, deal weapon plus ability score damage. So this is like enhanced effect. And then your temperance is just base damage. But you receive a consequence. So stepping back, combat, enemies don't roll as much as they do in D&D. And so to balance that, you will take damage on your attacks, or you have the potential of taking damage on your actions. And this sort of represents the combat exchange. I hit someone, he hits me back. Or I hit someone better, but he still nicks me. And so your action in combat will be the counterplay of attacking and defending. And so if you get a judgment, you essentially lost that exchange. But it doesn't have to be just damage. It could be other things as well. Typically, for you taking damage, typically for your actions, those other things will not happen. But when you're defending, those things definitely will. So to be very specific, when it's your turn, you will attack. If you get a temperance, you've made an exchange with that enemy. But when it's the enemy's turn, you will roll a defense action against your own disciplines, which might be modified. Now to just move to AM Mimic's question, how does armor work? Is it a damage reduction thing or an armor class thing? It is a damage reduction thing. So armor, I believe, is I have to go look. There's so there's shields, which will provide you a bonus to defense rolls. So like here, take a hit. Prior to an ally taking damage, you can move one tile and roll a defend save. Block all damage, block a damage plus 2 shield. So your shield has a rating. And you will block damage based on that rating. And then armor will reduce damage taken for that round. Or per that attack. I believe it's per attack. And then we also have like social abilities, but this is a warrior social ability. So I'll have to, and that might actually be a passive in the rework of abilities. The wielder, I know some things need to move. The wielder's ability, so wielder is all about manipulate skill and manipulating ancient technology. And the big thing for him is awaken the ancients. That is his intervention point ability. And what he can do is he can invoke essentially like a GM intrusion in a sense, where he can awaken, utilizing your knowledge of past technologies, you bring to life an ancient machine. Spend an intervention point and awaken a dormant machine that will provide one service for you and your party. And, oh, I know, I love Wizard Bird. I just love him. And so this service can be almost whatever you want it to be. Obviously, it needs to be somewhat rational, and you can also use it for combat, which is why it gets kind of wordy. In addition, if any of your allies are using the manipulate skill, you can spend your energy to help them. Wizard Bird. Yeah, I know, right? In our Discord, we actually have a channel called the Corvid Clan. Almost all of the members of that group have a Corvid name, and they just love sharing Corvid stuff. But yeah, Bird Wizard. So his primary weapon is... So no, there's not an official Hyperlight Drifter Discord from Heart Machine, but Metalweave Games, my company, we have a Discord for all the stuff that we do. Let me actually put a link, because I probably don't have a command for it. Hey, it worked! That's good, because I remember I updated it once, and then it didn't, like when I tried the command, it didn't work. So Metalweave Games, we've got a Discord where we have a whole Hyperlight Drifter. Pause for the random plug. Metalweave Games, we have our own Discord full of a bunch of awesome people. It's a very chill Discord. Most of it's Hyperlight Drifter and Hollow Knight focused. Hyperlight Drifter is obviously the game that we're working on that everyone's hyped about. Solar Ash, there's some phenomenal art that's been popping up in there. Hollow Knight being a close relative and a game that I would love to work on is also, we have a little section for Hollow Knight because Hyperlight Drifter everyone in Drifter loves Hollow Knight, so it was a natural fit there, as well as you can learn about other projects that we have in the works and just chill with other people. It's a nice, quiet Discord. So it's nice because I don't feel like I ever fall behind on it, even though there is activity, which is really nice. At least for now. I'm kind of terrified to see it grow and where I actually miss out on conversations. Hollow Knight, I'm still waiting I guess I've sent requests out to them. I think they're probably heads down on Silksong. I have not heard back from them. But I'll probably reach out again to them soon and see what's going on. But I have no updates on license acquisition per se, which sucks because I really want it. But I also got to finish this game, so I've got stuff to do. There is no shortage of things to do. Me taking time to do for this stream, it's I could just be doing 4.3 layout right now, which I should be doing, but, also I don't engage with the community enough, and I'm glad I can come and hang out with you guys and talk about this because on one hand, putting it out there is one thing, but on the other hand, it's also good to just explain it for people. So Bird Wizard, so his abilities are focused. So his weapon or his favored weapon is the wheeled machines. Actually, let's just pull up the Solar Ash Kingdom trailer because I would actually. Yeah, I know. One project at a time, right? Here, let me. So, oh wow, that quality. That is a potato. So, okay, I probably don't need 4K. That's a little overkill. But damn, that's pretty. So, what he's wearing here are what we're calling wheeled machines. These are devices that allow him to shape and manipulate hyperlight or hard light. So, it's like a size 11. Look at those feet. And then again, there is another ability that he uses for him to. So his boots, I would consider a wheeled machine as a type of wheeled machine or a special item, and then his bracelets, I would consider the wheeled machines that we would be giving. Oh, sorry, I did not mean to put a gender to it. You're correct. That was me being bad by just defaulting language. That they are wearing. So these I would call wheeled machines. The rest of the body and suit stuff, I have no idea. I have not played Solar Ash yet. So, but there again, you see there's an activation of an ability. So I would probably make that a special ability or a special item. That would be... Oh, but I might as well just finish the cinematic since we're here watching it. What's really cool is that some of this looks like it was shown off, like some of this stuff down here was shown off in the earlier trailers. It looks like it from a different perspective. PlayStation. Yeah, I'm not actually sure. The gender, I do not know, and I apologize for that. That was a misstatement on my behalf. So we have a bunch of abilities that they have. So skate would probably be one of those things that we would want to have as a passive, probably. Sorry, I'm spinning again. I would probably put skating as a passive ability and maybe make it like a traversal. So they would be able to use... It'll be interesting because by separating them out into disciplines, I know, right? It's so damn pretty. So some abilities, although focused, there will be some crossover. So for instance, skate, which I'd probably make a manipulate skill or manipulate passive, would probably help with survival abilities. So there will be some interesting crossovers for how that will work out. Like barrier connection, connect shockwave. These are all combat-like abilities that use manipulate. Or use the wield skill. Central console, intimidating power. The versifier, raccoon bard or dog bard. Probably dog bard. And so they're storyteller, so they can spend an intervention point to learn. So they can spend energy to learn information about the world. And they can ask the narrator a question, essentially. And then from there, they can kind of figure out how they know this information. And then they can also, and their energy use is helping people with the social discipline. AJ says, concept skate, reduce energy cost of movement. Yeah, that would be one way of doing it. So I can see two applications. One would be the combat application, and then another being sort of an exploration application. Or like instead of climbing or instead of using the climb skill, you can skate. Or you can use the manipulate skate. You can use the manipulate skill to climb or traverse a cliff or something like that. Or in addition, when moving from one tile to the next, if there is a connecting, who knows? I don't want to write it like a D&D ability, so I don't. It does not have to be 300 words. But yeah, it would be like reduce energy cost of movement by 1, or increase dash movement by 1. You could say dash 3 tiles instead of 2, and all climb checks can be made with a manipulate. Something like that. That would be the direction I would think, because then it's two-pronged, has 2 uses. You have an in-combat use and you have an out-of-combat use. But yeah, that would work too. At least that would be the direction I'd be thinking of it if I was to throw that in there. So versifiers, kind of more of a support style character. Gale dash, mirror image, so a lot of movement or illusion behind that. Helping allies or offsetting enemies, blunder, behind you, lead the attack, feint, pigeon, connection. So very social abilities, community involved. And because these will now be in a general ability list, technically your warrior could take pigeon. And so the boundaries for classes becomes less focused, but it becomes more open in terms of expression, which I think is really good. And also by limiting to 1 passive, players will have to choose what they want. And another thing is that you can freely swap abilities. It'll just cost a downtime point, I believe. 1 downtime per ability. So it's fairly easy to swap out abilities. So if you feel like, oh, we're going into combat, I want to slot slot a passive that's going to help me a little more in combat or dark dungeon, delving dark dungeons. And then there's the Delver, which is our rogue archetype. Survival. So for their ability, we're giving them safe respite. So when you take a rest, I actually need to adjust this because it will say when you take a downtime activity, or I'll have to alter this to downtime and say when you use this downtime activity, each ally gains or regains health or health and woe. And this is very much like the Darkest Dungeon camping kind of mechanic skills. And then experienced survivor, you can help people with their survival discipline. And then items, so versifier talents, dashing, temporal tear. So the idea that they can move very quickly, sort of. Woe is a combination of like bad luck, stress, and mental damage. It's sort of a catch-all, and it represents all and none of them and all of them at the same time. Like, it's never just stress, and it's never just mental damage. So it can encapsulate a few more things than that. For instance, like encouragement, the idea is that you can take on a point of woe and have your allies reroll a check. I'll probably remove the reroll and change that to a different mechanic. Or it would be like advantage. Encouragement would provide advantage to an ally. That would be my guess. I don't think I can use the term advantage, though. So, and we're gonna get to the woe section specifically, even though we've talked about it a little bit before. So versifiers, delvers. It's a resource you can burn to do wild shit. So temporal tear. So this is sort of like timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff. Bleed. So a lot of roguey stuff. Trap maker. I want to change up traps a little bit because there's a narrative use for traps that I think is very interesting that isn't explored. And then there's obviously the mechanical combat use of traps. So I need to make a highlight section on traps. And sorry, I'm doing circles a little too hyperactively. But I think there's a lot of cool things you can do with those. Sneak attack, because, you're a rogue, so why the heck not? Careful aim, survival instincts. So during a montage, if an ally is using an exploration skill, you can take on a point of woe to let them reroll. That would also be akin to advantage. I also need to clarify that language. Trailblazer. Sorry, there's no art, but there will be art. I also have to get a good... what I actually might want to do, just looking at the different classes, is I probably want to get a sentient, robot. I think that'd be really cool. Don't have much there, but the idea for them, or the fantasy that we would want to provide is survival traversal abilities. So we have... survival. So we would want the Trailblazer, Scout, Ranger to be exploration abilities. And let's just... Oh, perfect. I was going to say, let's skip ahead to discipline so we can get... So disciplines are the 5 skill groups that every class is specialized in. And there are a bunch of skills that we have sort of capped under them. Now, this isn't a hard list. This is sort of like a recommends list. So although there are skills here, you don't have to... if you are a pixel artist, feel free to reach out to me. You can send me a ping on Discord or Twitter, or from my website, MWGLive.games, and let's chat, or send me your portfolio, especially if you do pixel art, because I'm always interested in pixel artists. So disciplines. So exploration, skills used to traverse and explore the environment. So awareness, balance, climb, jump, lift, reflex, sneak, and swim. These are exploration. You are interacting with the environment. Survival skills. These are like camping and navigating and surviving. Cartography, cook, craft, forage, fortitude, heal, nature, like knowledge, nature, and track. Did I put track? No, I didn't. Okay. So kind of all the things that are needed to make camp and survive in camp, or survive out in the wilderness, whereas exploration is, how do I get around in the wilderness? Yes, there is you could say, so the reason why reflex is under exploration and fortitude is under survival is because I don't want to put them under the same discipline.
That is the main reason why. And fortitude being with survival, because it's tied with cooking and cartography and forage. There's a lot of physical survival in that. Whereas reflex feels like an exploration based, it's a movement based type of action. Your combat skills, quite obvious: aim, defend, fight, maneuver. I wish you can add more skills. You could say grapple, and that won't change things because you're still rolling under the same discipline. So we could add grapple, we could add aim, fight, defend, or other maneuvers, sort of a way to kind of combine movement, but I might also want to include special actions or combat actions. Maybe I should do like combat tricks or something like that, fighting tricks in there. But the idea is that it doesn't matter how many skills you put underneath it, because you're still rolling for your combat discipline. That would be your fortune and your judgment, and those two numbers. So it doesn't matter how many skills we put under it. And so this is sort of like a soft list to inform what you can do. Social skills: empathy, handle animal, influence, intimidate, lead, negotiate, perform, resolve. Resolve is sort of your will save. So as you can see in all of these, there's sort of a defense save, with exception to manipulate. And manipulate is all your skills that will be used for interacting with technology: access, repurpose, salvage, wield. There isn't really a defense skill other than like prevent yourself from getting shocked. Oh, is that? Woohoo! Hey, PRC. Is it PRC Argil or Cargill? I've actually never had to say that before, but thank you so much for the follow. So you'll be able to use those skills. PR Cargill, thank you. Yeah, there's an R. Cargill, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for the follow. So rather than having skills divided by ability scores, they're divided by discipline. Yes. So they're divided by discipline. Now, each each skill. So I sort of put a recommend. So in each skill, so here, we have like access is under the, where's my mouse? There it is under the manipulate discipline, but it uses insight. And this is sort of a recommended. This isn't a hard, like, every time you use access, you have to use insight. Every time you use cartography, you have to use insight. Every time you use climb, you have to use vigor. Which it's not vigor anymore, it's might. So I need to fix that. There are more recommendations on like the common usage of those skills. And so we have things like common uses: creating a map, reading a map, deducing the location of a place, finding where you are, not getting lost. Thank you, AJ, for the follow. Common consequences: getting lost, finding the wrong location, going down. And so I wanted to provide, yeah, exactly. So for instance, for some reason, foraging might require agility. Like, I don't want to stop you from doing that if there is a good justification or good need to do that. You're still rolling your survival, but your ability score only determines how much your energy cost is reducing the cost of the action, which would come into play if you're boosting your roll or if you're using an ability. So dashing a little bit back, let's go to the... So for instance, blunder, it's an influence action, but for instance, this could be strength. Like, if this guy is just an intimidating dude, like it's influence, I would still be okay with letting him use might. Using might, fight, their strength score, if they are narratively providing a reason why they're using their physical intimidation to like offset them. But yeah, that ability score choice would only change how you're reducing the cost of the action. So if you're not spending an action, so in the case of blunder, that costs energy, so that if you're using your might, you would reduce it by your might, you reduce it by your strength ability score or your vigor ability score. But if you're not using an action, the only time you're spending energy is when you're boosting your roll. So ability scores are not as important until it comes down to if you're spending energy. So for all the skill lists, we try to come up with common consequences or stuff that happens when you fuck up. Stepping in a trap, stepping on a weak part of the floor, balance, getting lost, empathy, getting misunderstood, invoking a reaction or creating a misunderstanding, healing, fortitude. And these are just common uses, common consequences with their discipline and common ability score or ability use. Currency, we use bits. I believe I'm changing it to bits, and then they get upgraded into gear bits. So 4 bits become a gear bit, and you spend these gear bits on advancements, or you spend these bits and gear bits on advancements. So armor provides an armor of 1 that reduces damage taken. Medium armor reduces damage by 2, but it increases the energy cost of agility actions. And increases your thresholds. So let me go. Actions that use agility will cost extra energy to perform. So if you have an ability score of 1 in your agility, then these nullify each other out. Bitcoins. Oh God, no. Oh, that's fractional bits are called Bitcoins. I kind of want to save that somewhere. And then thresholds will increase the fortune threshold for exploration skills. And those are your, swimming, your climbing skills. So they will increase the thresholds the heavier the armor that you get. And then these can take a variety of forms. Shields. Shields provide a bonus granted to your reflex and defense rolls. So these are so armor will reduce damage taken. And then your shield defense will increase your roll results for those saves or actions. Weapons are quite simple. There's so far just light or unarmed, light, and heavy. They can be almost whatever you want them to be. I pressed things. There we go. So weapons have costs. Oh, and then the other thing with bits is that they're also used for your character advancements. So obviously, unlike D&D, we don't have massive lists of cool shit you can buy, like caltrops and stuff like that. We kind of just want to hand wave that for the most part, but obviously we will find useful things for you to have. So we have I'm going to get to it. But so you have, I'll just stay on this page actually for simple ease of use. So you have your light melee weapon, you have your heavy melee weapon. Obviously the distinguisher here is one hand, two hand. Obviously you can wield a weapon in two hands. We have your shields, you have your heavy ranged and heavy melee. They have a range associated with them. So you can only shoot so far, so you may have to move on the map to actually get shots in. And then you have your special equipment. Explosives, stim packs, module expansions. And the interesting things with these is that they're per scene. Or actually, they might actually be per encounter. Yeah, per scene. Okay. But most, so per scene. I'm curious about maybe changing that to per encounter. But the idea is that in the game Hyperlight Drifter, you get an you can get a grenade, you can use it time and again. I didn't want to run into a system where players were buying grenades en masse. And same with the stim pack. I didn't want a scenario where players were buying stim packs en masse and just shooting themselves up when they're in combat. So there is a use for them, and every time you buy one, you get another use of it. So you can buy 2 explosives for 4 bits, and you get to use that twice per encounter, or twice per scene. I might increase the effects based on the use per scene, because then we have scene transitions and stuff like that. So something just a little harder to nail down. Weapons are a lot like Cypher, yes. And part of that is to allow narrative flexibility. In Drifter, there's a lot of cool-ass characters with very cool-ass abilities and weapons. And like there's the frog with the glaive. And I don't want to stat a glaive because why make it different than a heavy weapon? Now there's actually things that we can do to make these a little more interesting. And one of the things is for light and heavy weapons, we actually will have a special ability. So one thing we haven't gotten to yet are combat actions. So we have a base list of actions that you can take. Some weapons will grant an action, such as Stunning Strike is an unarmed shield attack. Swift Strike is a dual wield action that you can take. After making an attack, you can use this ability on the same target, deal weapon damage against target. And here, the damage that you take is severely reduced because it is a 0 action. So just to quickly jump into the action economy of Drifter, which I haven't quite fully explained, is that you can take as many actions as you like on your turn. So, but for every action after the first, it is an increasing 1 energy cost. So, for instance, we see Stunning Strike here. It costs +1 energy. So my first action, if I do Stunning Strike, it'll only cost 1 energy. And this is before we start discounting ability scores. That hits, we resolve it. That hits, I get a Temperance, I take some damage. That exchange is done. And then after that, I want to do another Stunning Strike. So now the second action after the first, so it's increasing +1. So now it's going to cost 2 energy for Stunning Strike. And so this goes on and goes on until I'm done with my actions, essentially. Obviously, you could go into energy debt, but I highly wouldn't recommend that. But you can do as many actions as you like. Most people tend to stick to 1 or 2 because of the increasing costs. And also, you want to conserve your energy. Because you want to be able to boost your rolls when shit hits the fan. I think the energy cost is an interesting way of handling multiple actions. Yeah, I'm really proud of it, actually. It's one of my favorite mechanics that I've put in. Part of it, I feel, is sort of inspired by Scion, first edition, in which they had a tick system where the movement speed would move you along the axis of combat. But yeah, it's very much like, interestingly, Cypher was actually one of the core systems when I was first conceiving of Drifter, was going to be built in Cypher, but heavily modified. I think to the extent where Monty Cook Games was sort of uncomfortable at calling it Cypher hack, because it was heavily modified. But I'm sort of glad that the response, there was a delay in the response. They were busy with stuff, and how the Drifter contract came through with how I got the licensing with Hyperlight Drifter, the timing, and then when Gen Con was coming, is how I really ended up just starting to build my own system from scratch. And then trying to take the lessons that I had and things I wanted to change in Cypher and fully commit to those changes and into other ways I didn't expect. Pummeling Blow, a heavy weapon, Overcharged. So wheeled machines I haven't really gotten into, and I'm tossing between a couple ideas. Wheeled machines I might change to be a basic. There will be a couple different types of wheeled machines, is what I'm thinking of doing. There'll be like the Lance wheeled machine, there'll be a Hex Blast wheeled machine, and there will probably be like a Pew Pew P-gun wheeled machine. And what I want to do is have abilities that modify those. This is right now conceptual, but the idea is that if you have a lance wheeled machine, your abilities that you get will shape it or enhance it in some way. So perhaps the lance will increase the distance, the duration, the number of units affected, a reflect or a bounce, to things like pushing units, and I'm thinking that the enhancement will be to the abilities that you use. So perhaps we'll have a push ability, and that will enhance your wheeled machine ability, whichever wheeled machine you use to do a push effect. So sort of like a modifier enhancer. At least that's the concept I'm thinking of. Right now, we just have wheeled machine. They do damage, and you can spend energy to increase that damage. And so right now, we just have abilities that are like barrier protection, kinetic shockwave, push, hex blast. And so things like hex burst and lance will be wheeled machines in their own right, and then the abilities you pick will be modifiers to those. But I got to test those out, see how they look, see how they feel, and then, see if that shows up in 4.3 or not. We've gone through weapons. All right, special equipment. Explosives. So what we have here is they provide you with an action, apply Stimpack medication to consume a restorative, and then it heals you. That is an action plus 0 energy, so you can just do it. If it's your first action, it's free. If it's your second action, it would cost 1 energy. An explosive, throw an explosive, costs 1 energy. Stuff happens and explodes. You don't... Oh, whoops, I need to edit that one with the consequence. But only if you roll a judgment, stuff happens. Module expansion, increase your dash module to do more dashes. And then we come into our resource systems. Ingredients and components. So in Hyperlight Drifter, you only have bits. And something that I've kind of taken away from a lot of tabletop RPGs is how to deal with crafting systems, and just in other games in general. And the thing with tabletop RPGs is once you start getting into the weeds with crafting systems, they get too complicated. Sure, rare materials and stuff is really cool, and they should have a use, but I think at one point, when does your crafting system become a mini game in its own right? And I wanted to avoid that by making them flexible and easy to use. So ingredients can be used for cooking, cooking and healing, and components can be used for crafting, upgrades, base upgrades, and stuff like that. And so as you collect components, you can do upgrades to bases. You can start creating a base. You can start augmenting your weapons, and by keeping it simple, in the sense, I feel well. In addition, the downtime system, which is a new. So before, these actions there used to be an action associated to it, and it was kind of complicated. Let me actually see. I didn't put any crafting things in here. Okay. Crafting will be a later in the ability section. It was awkward, and this is where the downtime mechanic started kicking in. And so being able to use components in downtime made it a lot cleaner in terms of how they interacted with each other. And also, components and ingredients can be a reward because they can be used by players, as well as bits, as well as social rewards and stuff like that. In it, I will probably create a couple special components, and these will be things that will augment abilities, or we'll get into that as... I think I have that in this... Let me just take one look at the table of contents, be sure I have it. Combat options, weapon talents, downtime, yeah. We'll get there when we get to downtime. All right, full screen. All right, so advancement. You can spend 4 bits for an advancement. Sorry. Let me just read comments. Mimic says, I remember having a really long discussion about crafting system for one of my homebrew campaigns. Massive headache. Yeah. Crafting systems. No offense to Numenera. Crafting was very open-ended in the first edition, but as they went into Discovery and Destiny, crafting got a lot more complicated. And I don't know if it benefited from that, because it almost made it a game in itself to be hunting for certain iotum, and certain objects. And not to hammer them, I think it's a very deep and unique system, and it provides a lot of immersion into the setting and world of the game. But on the second hand, it becomes a lot of bookkeeping, and it becomes way more busy work to track crafting as a game versus leaving it open for, we build this because we have this many resources. Like, heck, Warcraft. I just need gold, lumber, and there's another resource, isn't there? Food. Gold, lumber, and food, or any other RTS. And it doesn't, obviously lumber is not building everything, but it's so much easier to build a game and just suspend belief in that fantasy, because it makes it a lot easier to move along. We know this is a resource, it's a limited resource, we use it to build stuff, and as long as it makes sense in the fantasy, just move on and get to the stuff that the core game is about. Get to the good stuff and not worry about getting into the weeds. So in advancement, you can only spend advancement when you're in a sanctuary. So far, you can spend, so bits can be used for advancement as well as equipment. And as you spend your bits, you advance down the advancement track. Now, if we go back to the character sheet, your advancement track, it's split into what I call them, tiered advancements: Explorer, Hero, Paragon, Legend, and then general enhancements. So as you advance, you start from left to right, essentially. So you get one Explorer, and then you fill out these 4. You get Hero, you fill out these 4, get Paragon, fill out these 4, and then you get Legend. So in between each advancement, you get 4. Your general advancements, your 4s, you can choose whatever you want. So this could be more points across your energy and health pool. You can get a new talent. You can reduce the discipline threshold. And then from there, you have your tiered advancements. And this is things these are where I call prestige classes almost. These are where we have your power jumps, essentially. And so for Explorer, this is where we introduce to your character's ability scores. For the Explorer, you can pick one of the 3 benefits: gain 2 points to put across your 4 ability scores, gain a point to put into your boost scores, or gain a bunch of health and energy. Now, originally it was just going to be your ability scores, but that feels restrictive. And also, maybe for new players, it would be a great place to start, because then it introduces the mechanics of ability scores slowly, and then players can ease into it. And every tiered advancement, Hero, Explorer, Paragon, and in Hero and Paragon is where we start introducing the prestige classes. You gain ability score points to put in, and then you can choose a path, an advancement path, and these will provide you with a perk, which will start with and these are still in development and working out, but things like you get a perk immediately, which will be probably, so for this one, it's 1 per scene, reroll any handle animal check for the Beastmaster. So you get 2 points you get to choose between putting ability scores or getting a boost score increase, and you get this perk for the path you pick. In addition, all your future advancements, you can pick one of these abilities, which I have not written out, but so you can get a companion to help fight, and you will get an attack action that'll allow you to, or like actions that you can use with your animal companion. You can choose an ability that'll allow your companion to do a distraction or a trick. And these will be things that you can slot. There is a consideration of opening up slots, but that may be more difficult. But maybe for the advanced path, that might be an option where you get an extra ability or you can attach an extra ability. So as you advance, so then when you hit hero, so if you hit hero, you pick Beastmaster. But then when you pick Paragon, you can pick Swordsmaster or the Proprietor or the Gunsmith. So you can get more abilities and choose. So you get like a little increased sword damage by 1, gain the following you can choose between the following talents, increase dash distance by a tile. You're able to use your components to modify and create weapons. And so the idea there is that it unlocks potential that you can choose to invest in. What I might do is change it so it's a intervention point ability. So we're sort of playing with that still. There's a lot of open-ended stuff that can happen, but part of that is because we're still nailing down the core mechanic of the abilities, the actions. And once the actions get really locked down, then I'll be really building out the prestige classes or the paths, advancement paths. And so you can pick Beastmaster. And then from there, what we might do is if you pick it again, we'll give you a different ability. So if you want to like Beastmaster, 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 we want to provide a way that we can reward you to going double Beastmaster. And then Paragon with and then Legend. Right now, I'm considering that to be a separate path or a separate set of options, but I'm not 100% sure yet. But yeah, each advancement, you'll unlock more abilities that you can slot, which will then provide more customization. You might get another intervention point ability, or skill-based ability. And we'll see how that comes out as we start building into it. Intervention points. As we know, you can use your intervention points to activate an ability, or you can use it to upgrade your roll result. And then you can gain them by downgrading your result or getting a critical fail or roll, or critical hit or fail. And then there's obviously the narrator saying, kind of like Numenera, you can insert an intervention by granting an intervention point to the players. Or the community recognition. If everyone agrees that you did something freaking awesome, like you can nominate them and add an intervention point to the table. Whoa. There are times in which all of your stresses, misfortunes, and burdens come to a breaking point. As your character is exposed to the various troubles and horrors of the world, they will take on woe, slowly filling their woe dial. Woe comes in various sources, such as woe-based talents, encountering something horrifically or unworldly, or even failing social situations. Once your woe dial fills up, you immediately become tested. Clear your woe dial and make a resolve save. You're allowed to spend energy on the save to boost. However, each point of energy you spend adds an equal number of woe points to your new dial. So, in keeping with the mechanic of the game, where you can spend energy to boost your roll, I didn't want to prevent that for woe. And then to balance it out, for each point that you spend to boost, you gain woe points. So, let me just open up a PDF. Or actually, in this case, so if we filled up our woe dial and we clear it, I want to spend 2 points of energy. I'm going to gain 2 woe because I'm spending it to to get a better result, essentially. And so I come with the consequence of having to be tested yet again sooner than everyone else will be. So if you get a fortune, you get to pick a boon. So once your woe dial fills up, you immediately become tested. Your resulting threshold depends on how you proceed. So pick from the boons, or your temperance and judgments, pick from the burdens. And this requires an aspect. You get a burden, which we'll just go into those. These are when aspects of when our fears and uncertainties get the better of us. If you result of the judgment or temperance, You'll pick one burden for your character to bear. You're free to pick whichever burden you think is best fits your character and the events at hand. The burdens read as follows: burden name, skill prohibition, and discipline. Each burden has an associated skill that you are unable to use until the burden is resolved. So in this case, and then there's a discipline modifier. In addition to being able to use one skill, burdens will make all skills in its discipline more difficult to perform and succeed, starting with a base of 2+ modified. I'm actually going to have to check that. That might be changed as of recent, and then you can resolve a burden. Once you've acquired a burden, you can attempt to resolve it, much like KNACKS, picked from the list of resolutions. So indulging in a vice or sanctuary, spend 4 bits, resting in a discovery, undoing a past wrong, or if another character uses empathy skill on the player. So there's a special action that you can do. So burdens, if you are lost, you cannot use the track skill, but all survival discipline skills will have an increased threshold. So if you're confused, you can't use forage. If you're afraid, you can't use handle animal. If you're exhausted, you can't use jump. And you get to pick this. You get to pick what fits your character, what you think fits the narrative. And yeah, it feels very Darkest Dungeon-y. But from that aside, we're letting you pick the problems you get. Creative block, craft, tasteless, insecure. And then for boons, you get a boon, so heightened senses, increase your intellect by 1, and ends at the end of the scene. Effects run till the end of the scene. Confident, reduce a total of 3 points of woe between you and your allies. Inspirational, reduce the thresholds of all your allies' next roll by 2. Second wind, regain all energy and distribute 4 points of energy between your allies. So there's a lot of like in Darkest Dungeon, when you're stalwart or heroic, you can carry that benefit to your allies. Now, the thing is, when you roll this, you don't have to use it right away. You can save it and use it later. But there is a duration on it. So, and then we'll be expanding out the where am I? Boons list. Okay, phew. So the burdens will be expanding out to try and cover all of the skills, so that you can pick the skills that feel appropriate, or the skill or burden that feels appropriate. We'll try to cover all the disciplines in that way. There was a mechanic we were thinking of doing, was as you increased in the number of boons and burdens, the harder it was to succeed. And I'm very conflicted about this mechanic. The idea was that I didn't want people abusing the energy mechanic and saying, oh, I filled up on woe, I'm going to spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points of energy. And if I have 2 nerve, that's plus 14 to my roll, or whatever my roll result was, which will probably make me succeed. So I'm torn between putting a soft cap on how much energy you can spend based on your nerve, or based on your attributes, your highest grit score, or sorry, your highest boost score, or having a mechanic that says for each trait you acquire, the harder it is to succeed or to get a fortune result, because it increases your success threshold, or increases all thresholds. So I'm sort of torn between that. Right now, it's just the increase in difficulty. So your first one, there's no modification. It doesn't matter if you resolve it or not. This is just a way to check whether you resolve it. But your next one, the thresholds for your social thresholds for success and for fortune and judgment would go up by 1. Same with your second one. And then your third one would go up by 2, go up by 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6. And as you advance, you're also reducing your disciplines, or you have the opportunity to reduce your disciplines. And so There is a hypothetical situation which could be abused, but it is very specific, and I don't think I need to worry about it as much. But it's something that I'll need more play testing on. That's me getting into the real nitty-gritty of the mechanic and how that system is. But right now, even without it, I'm still happy with it. Yeah, burn all the energy or resolve for a price. So burning all their energy would mean that like they would come up to here and then they would just be tested again after they get like 2 more woe. And so the idea, but the thing is that they could just spend another 7 energy, because energy is not really a limiting feature in that unless they're like in combat. And so that's where I think having the increased difficulty becomes helpful. Because as they advance, or as they acquire more, so if they did do this twice, subsequent ones will still continue to get harder, even though they'll come at a slower pace. But yeah, it's a very interesting balance, and I'm not sure if I over-designed it, and that's something that'll be interesting to tackle, but very specific, and totally happy to chat about. Corruption. One of the reasons many do not leave the safety of the sanctuaries is to protect themselves from corruption, a sort of sickness eventually afflicts all drifters and eventually consumes them. On your character sheet, you'll find a corruption track that has 12 or 13 marks broken out into various tiers. These tiers don't do anything, but they serve as benchmarks to show how far along the corruption track, how far along you are in the corruption track. As you advance in the corruption, you will fill out each diamond, progressing from left to right, and you may take on points of corruption from exploring the depths of an ancient facility, making a fortitude save, when fighting with particular creatures, or interacting with specific objects. As you advance in corruption, you may begin to show symptoms. This is up to you to manifest, but this does not impact your ability to function. What we will likely do is add opportunities for the narrator to insert scenes to the player, or insert scenes or visions to the player. Of course I closed it, so I'm just going to highlight this scene right here. Visions, scenes, or other aspects of the void, as it's apparently called, because in Hyperlight Drifter, an opening cinematic, you have a similar thing with the dog and the towers. So I would assume that the narrator then, like when you hit a certain point, they can grant an intervention point and then provide this vision for your player or scene. You can take on corruption willfully by not dying. If you were reduced below 0 hit points, you fall unconscious and take on a point of corruption and woe. You can choose to take on 2 points of corruption if you want to regain all your energy and continue fighting. I should say regain a point of health. Or regain points of health, or regain half your health and energy. So your character won't die, or you can choose not to die until your drifter's time truly comes. And as you advance in corruption, the cutscenes and coughing are manifestations of that. And then Judgment's Bargain. If there's an outcome that you really want to achieve, the narrator can offer you a bargain for the desired effect. Now, this is also a very, very open thing about you achieving a narrative goal at a extreme cost to the player, because this willfully will kill you eventually. And then Corruption's Epilogue. When you reach the maximum corruption, it is time for your characters to find their final moments, talk to the narrator to understand. Oh, I didn't finish writing it. Whoops. But essentially, that will be the moment where you want to plan how your character exits the game. Usually when you're the point before, you're going to start planning that. Planning that with your narrator. Yes, those are the stim packs. A stim pack is a special item that's used once per scene. And then obviously you can buy more of them to have more of them. And they do not heal corruption. Nothing heals corruption except for a discovery, and that's only in certain cases. So you find your character's epilogue, or when you're starting to get close and start planning. So the idea is that it's a very important pacing tool because you can effectively figure out where the campaign is going and how it's going to end. And for your players, obviously you should talk to your players about what their thoughts are about ending it and how it should end and how they want their characters to end, because this is truly a story between everyone. And so one thing to figure out is, as players come to their end, how to best have them resolve. And an epilogue is one way I imagine that, or a last stand. Or retirement in one way or another. So giving out corruptions, there's multiple ways. This is sort of corruption for the narrator. It's important to try and distance out instances of corruption, although many of the examples could be stacked in multiple times in an adventure. That's not the intent, to have them all applied at once. Picks the one that best fits how the party interacts with the events at hand. Exploration. Corruption gained while exploring will likely not allow a save, but venturing deep inside a corrupted location, resting inside a corrupted location, or reaching a particular depth in an area of corruption. Combat, fighting a corrupted creature, likely allow a save. Corrupted creatures uses a special move, likely allow a save. And then manipulate, interfacing with corrupted tech. Downtime. So, corruption's a very interesting, heavy tool. And it needs to be used sparingly and effectively. Or effectively in terms of moments where it has meaning. Obviously in the beginning, it's kind of hard to feel that, but as you get halfway through the corruption track, players will notice and be more careful or be more cognizant of where they are on the corruption. And is there a way they can tell? No. And that's partially because it is uncertain how corruption spreads in the world and what is generating the corruption. And I'm leaving that out specifically for narrative reasons, to continue building the fantasy of Hyperlight Drifter and enforcing the fantasy that has been... creating dramatic decisions is one thing. And that would be something like Judgment's Bargain as well. Creating that dramatic decisions. For instance, when the Drifter unlocks the monoliths, he is taking on a point of... Or not the monoliths. Getting the cores, he is essentially taking on corruption by getting those. And then when he enters the final boss scene, he is also... or when he's entering the Unground, he is taking on corruption there as well. I'm not sure if there's any other questions you might have about that specifically. It's a very interesting mechanic. I was actually very surprised when Alex said he liked it, because I was sort of terrified of how he would react, because I'm not sure. It's my interpretation of the game in a sense, with the lore that I've been given. I'm going to wait a couple seconds just for... Oh, my music has stopped. Speaking of music. Oh, because I stopped it. Waiting for chat to catch up in a second. All right. I think we're good. All right. So away from the hot and heavy stuff, downtime. Downtime is maybe didn't wait long enough. I would call it big risk to pitch something like that with a heart disease that can kill him at any moment. Yeah, so it's interesting because I see it as a representation of Alex's congenital heart disease. Or in the game, I see it as in the Hyperlight Drifter video game, I see the sickness of the Drifter related to Alex's congenital heart disease. And I see that very much the Drifter's experience with the coughing, the visions, or the experiences as part of that experience of his disease. The catchy part with it is, as a game designer, implementing dying and disease, or born illnesses and disease, a very difficult thing to talk about, because I can't obviously say you're gonna, like, here is this mechanic where you are going to die and you are constantly dying, and it's because you have a disease through one method or another. And so it's a very hard to translate system. And here, let me just go back to corruption. And so part of that is the disease, what I'm calling corruption, is the corruption is not something that you're born with. It is something that you get. So people who become drifters gain corruption. And this is enforced through lore, as I can vaguely say. As the pink drifter, he also has the same disease, as the same illness as the drifter. So other people are getting it by exploring out in the world. And so the only things that I can say definitively is corruption is something the players get, and they have a shared experience of visions, which is a difficult thing to do, and I don't want to use the visions in a way that tells the GM what the players think. And so for the narrator mechanics, I want them to provide a mechanic, or I want to provide the narrator with a mechanic where they can provide a vision to the players as a shared experience, but in a way that's providing insight to what's to come. And then in addition, the corruption mechanic itself, how it works is players taking on corruption as they explore, is both willing and unwilling. There are mechanics that, such as you're venturing inside corruption's locations and resting inside corrupted locations, the narrator can say, as you rest, gain a corruption point. And that's a point of not severity, but a point of realization that this is a dangerous world. And this is a non-forgiving world. More so than it is about the creatures you fight. And that with the time that you have as drifters, players, before you retire, you need to make the best of the time you have. And I'm not pushing that. I mean, I might need to explain that a little more in depth, but I think it's a very interesting mechanical thing to talk about and have players consider as their characters start acquiring corruption, because they're going to become more cognizant of it as they gain more of it. And it's one of those mechanics that do need to be sort of explained from the start, or at least have an understanding of when starting the game. They might not know what it does and how it works, but what they do need to know is when to fill up on corruption. We plan the ending of your character, or we plan the exit of your character, be that a silent, resolute death, or a quiet, calm, ending to that character, or a moment of glory, or something else, or a night closure of events. And that's something that Relzin asks, are the characters aware of corruption when they set out on their journey? I would say yes. This is the reason why most people are not drifters, is because drifters do eventually succumb to corruption, or they do catch corruption and eventually succumb to it. Yeah, it's one of those, it's a very interesting, heavy topic. And it's something I'm having people look at, especially within the disability space, within the accessibility space, because it is one of those complicated mechanics that if I don't word it right, or put the presentation of the wording right, it can be definitely interpreted terribly. But yeah. So, we were talking about downtime. On the bright side of life, yeah. So, yeah, moving on. But yeah, feel free to, I'd be happy to chat about corruption. It's a complicated topic, honestly, and I am not the best person equipped to talk about it because, I mean, even though I designed the system around it, it affects people in ways that I am probably ignorant of, ignorant's not the right word. I'm not aware of, or in a perspective of seeing that might affect them in that way. But I'd be happy to talk about that at a later time, or end of stream, or as I play Hyperlight Drifter. So, moving onward, downtime. So, downtime is set up as adequate rest and preparation are crucial to your survival as an explorer. In Drifter, we call this downtime, where you can choose to rest, mend your body, and cook up meals and snacks, craft tools and upgrades, and mentally prepare yourself for the challenges ahead. When the party arrives at a familiar sanctuary or chooses to break camp to rest for the night, the narrator will provide the characters with a number of downtime slots. The players are free to spend these slots as they see fit, with various preparation actions, some taking more slots than others. So, a rough guesstimate of slots: campfire evening, campfire resting, 1 downtime slot, 1 day of work, 3 slots-ish, and then 2 days of work, around 6 slots. That's a very rough guesstimation. Obviously, I don't want your players. So, if players want to spend more time working on downtime projects than the narrator allotted, they can, but doing so will advance the state of events in the world, and for every slot added, the narrator can increase the adversity level of the challenges that lie ahead. So the idea here is, I give you downtime slots to do stuff, but I don't want you to spend 3 weeks or a month crafting or building up a base. That's not what the core loop of the game is about. The narrator can grant that, sure, but I don't want players to hijack. I don't want players to hijack the events that are the story events at hand, or get fallen into the rabbit hole of crafting. Because crafting is a secondary system, and I don't want the secondary system to become the primary system. And so this is one method that the narrator can use to say, okay, you took an extra day. So you took an extra day of work. So that's 3 downtime slots. So now I can increase the difficulty level of things that are to come because we spent time working on this cool gun that you have. Some downtime slots require multiple downtime slots. If the full time is not currently allotted, a character can choose to do partial work. So encourage, grant your ally a +2 bonus that they can apply to one roll. So Mimic asks about what's the deal with the drone, or sprite is normally called in the game and Kickstarter. that floats next to the drifter. So the sprite is an interesting little guy, and what he does is he helps the drifter interact with technology. The thing is that sprites are actually very rare in the world of Drifter. And so they're by nature expensive or just hard to come by. So most characters will not have a sprite. I've been considering an ability or a upgrade path or like an advancement path that includes a sprite, but the core purpose of the sprite was to help the drifter interact with technology. It scans things, it interacts with things. So I would almost consider it a manipulate aid. And that might be something I could make as a passive in terms of like helpful sprite or companion sprite. And the sprites could be potentially slotted under a passive because that's what they are, sort of, in a sense. I could even actually have abilities with them too. So yeah, maybe an advancement path with sprites would be an interesting thing. But yeah, they're technically a very special, rare piece of equipment. So downtime activities. So we have personal downtime activities, which is like encourage. This kind of reminds me of Darkest Dungeon. Grant an ally +2 bonus that they can apply to a 1 roll in the future. If the ally you're encouraging has a burden that can be resolved by this activity, resolve it. So this is where we tie into starting to handle some of our burdens with these personal care downtime activities. Support an ally. Pick an ally. The next time you spend energy to assist them with an action, get 1 free energy point. You must spend energy for this free point to count. If the ally you're encouraging has a burden, this can be resolved. Oh yeah, I was wondering about calling it a wielder buddy. There was at one point making it one of the wielder companions, or one of the wielder ability features. Reflect. There is some time for improvement. Pick an action or a skill you failed at, and the next time you perform that action, you can choose to upgrade it to the next threshold as if you had spent an intervention point. And so these are things you can do to like buff yourself in downtime prior to exploring. So if we're doing a campfire or an evening or camping for the night, you could, as a narrator, you can grant 1 or 2 downtime slots where they can choose to spend on these things. Take in the view. Discovery required. You seclude yourself to the side, overlooking the view. Recover 2 energy and woe. If you have a burden that can be resolved by this activity, resolve it. Feast. Create a large fancy meal for your party. Everyone recovers 2 energy and 2 health and 4 energy. If you have a burden that can be resolved by this activity, resolve it. And then preparation. Swap out your abilities. The first time you use a newly slotted ability, gain +1 to your roll. And this is how you slot new abilities. Then there's crafting downtime things, like enhancing your weapon. Through clever resource or practice methods, you increase the effectiveness of you or your ally's weapon, increase the damage by 1. Deflector, a small device that can help intercept damage. Before, this used to be a skill roll, and it felt awkward. So as a downtime activity, now you can choose to do... so when activated, the deflector uses the user's choose... the deflector... at the user's choosing will intercept 1 consequence affecting them. If the deflector is not destroyed before your downtime, it will break down, allowing you to recover a component. Create restorative snacks. So these are kind of like stim packs, but one-time use. They're consumables. Tend to wounds. Take a moment to aid yourself or your allies. You can distribute either 2 points of health or 3 points of energy between yourself and 1 ally. For every 2 ingredients, hey. You can choose to increase the amount of health or energy recovered. So you can burn your ingredients to heal up. You can burn them to create consumables for while you're adventuring. So obviously you have to decide whether you're going to, if you're full or need to heal up, or if you need to craft stuff, but ingredients do cost. Then there's weapon augments. So weapon augments, some weapons are special and have augments on them. These are typically not available to players. So the idea here, I'm going to change this a little bit, but the idea is you can upgrade your weapons. And some weapons that the narrator will give can be upgraded. So such as a boss weapon drop. Can be a weapon with an augment on it. And so you will see that for like, what the shotgun will be, what the heavy will. So we'll be able to add weapons that say like, if you use a shotgun, you can hit people in 2 tiles. Or if you want to focus it, hit 1 person for a lot of damage. So weapon deflect. So 3 development phases. So you need, for each phase, you need 1 bit, 3 components, and 2 downtime slots to complete. And so this is sort of the partial work, but broken down into more consumable chunks. So 1 bit, 3 components, 2 downtime slots. You can build a phase. So at any point you use the dash to evade damage, you can deflect half of it upon an enemy. Charge spin attack, 4 development phases, 1 bit, 2 components, 2 downtime slots per phase. Charge up and unleash a devastating area effect, dealing 2 damage to all enemies in the tile. If you have cleave, you can spend a dash to increase the damage by 1. Then there's base building activities as well. You can create a safe haven, 5 development phases. So because Drifter is built on a hex grid, you would have to travel back to your tile and then do a downtime slot, which 3 downtime slots, as we noted, is 1 day of work. So it would require 5 days of work split across your party. So obviously parties can contribute. So if you have a party of 4, you could technically do this in 2 days, is to create a safe haven. And then we can build it up to a community center, trading post, upgrade accommodations, crafting stations, and this could be creating a new sanctuary or enhancing an existing sanctuary. And so we'll be building out. I'm sort of tempted to build, let me open GOG. Actually, I don't need to open GOG. What am I doing? I'm sort of very tempted to do the Warcraft 2 build chart. Let me see. Build order, build chart, build order. Is that it? Images. I think it's Warcraft 3, not 2. Yeah, it's 3. So this is actually a very inspiring. Oh, of course. No, I just want to open the image. Open image, new tab. There we go. So this is one of those things I think would be really cool to have, is you could have a way. No, I don't need you, GOG, anymore. I'm done. You can have a way where you could build out your sanctuary and then build out your safe haven to a sanctuary and then upgrade that sanctuary, maybe not into a stronghold, but you have different paths upon, like, you kind of have your economy, you have your community, you have your combat, and you can upgrade it along different paths along that. At least that's the direction I'm thinking. It might be cool to have a little build chart like this. I'm not sure, but I think it would be really interesting to have something like that where you can have, I skipped forward a bit, where you can kind of see the progression and where you can build out and upgrade. And then you could easily have like the development phases under it, with each phase under that. So then people can plan out, do we want to do like a techno advanced sanctuary, or do we want to do a defensive sanctuary to fend off invaders, creatures, a titan, something like that. Like upgrade accommodations. And then some of the things here too I really want to get into is how to make the community interesting. And that's where there's a weird balance between tying, like, creating unique NPCs for the players and being able to provide opportunities for unique NPCs to exist. So that's one of those interesting discussions about how much can we help narrative get built with the expansion of towns in Drifter. Exploration. So traversing the world. So right now, I'm just going to pop open a GIF. The one thing about being the developer and doing a show off is I get to show off a lot of things. So the world of Drifter is a vast one. You and your companion set out to explore the world. You will travel across vast landscapes and environments. Along your travels, you may encounter ruined facilities, the corpses of great titans, hidden secrets, small communities, and more. This section will provide you the methods, traversing the environment. So drifters in their nature are going to want to go out into the unknown for one reason or another, be it for themselves, the community, or something else. So how do they get to those evocative locations and those unique encounters? As the narrator, instead of saying, after 3 weeks of travel, you arrive at a great obelisk, we want to set it up so that the act of getting there, the act of the adventure, is just as important as the adventure of being at the obelisk, for example. So we set Drifter up as a hex crawl. And part of that is each tile should represent obviously meaningful travel. But one thing we want to do is we want to give opportunities for players to contribute about what happens the journey along the way. So we don't really want to rely on role lists, although some role lists will be created, or some lists will be created for the use of the narrator to figure out what happens in the area, what discoveries they might find. And so the party will move from tile to tile, and we'll typically do this through a montage. The montage is a very flexible 4th edition skill challenge for those who have seen 4th edition. And the skill challenge will be, it's not really a skill challenge. We're not trying to get to so many successes. We're not trying to accomplish something with the skill challenge. It's not a skill challenge. So the idea is that every player on the table will pick a skill on their skill list and be like, I want to use cooking, or I want to use forecast weather, or use my knowledge nature, or I want to use combat, use fight or maneuver, and I want to find favorable weather as we travel. I want to cook I want to cook a good meal as they travel. And so each of these skills become a highlight for each tile, or each of the skills the players use will be a highlight for that tile that is explored. You could do 2 rounds of players going around, or 1 round per tile. It's kind of up for the narrator. I'm sort of leaning towards 2 because it makes, after the first round and players warm up to it, it gets a lot more interesting. And so the idea is it's a collaborative storytelling exercise. The narrator says, we're going to travel to the gate across the waterfall. And how are we going to get there? So we're going to have to travel 3 tiles around. So for the first tile, we're going to say, because, there's a lot of cliffs and ledges, let's use, I'm going to roll my climb skill. I'm going to roll a d20. I get a temperance or a judgment. And it'll be, okay, so do you want to spend energy on that? And so the result of that will be okay, so you spend energy and you just make it. So perhaps you guys are climbing across, you're using a rope bridge, and it breaks. And just before you're able to dash across to the other side before it falls, your character takes, 1 energy damage, 1 woe, or even you lose one component as it falls out of your pocket. And then you go to the next player. Okay, what skill are we going to use? I want to use cook or forage to find food as we travel. As you guys are going along, he gets a judgment. Lo and behold, so it's okay, so you find some mushrooms. And unexpectedly, you thought they were healthy, you thought they were good, and they're poisoned. So now you guys ate these terrible poison mushrooms, so if you've thrown up, and then you go to the next player, and what you could say is maybe combat. So maybe the mushrooms we picked was from a grove that belonged to a nearby community. And from there, you can kind of like interrelate the skills that happened. You can interrelate how players' actions contributed to another. Oh, maybe the climb skill. Perhaps the fighter wants to contribute energy. Oh, maybe he saved. He helped save you. He caught your arm. And it's a very free-flowing skill exercise, community exercise in terms of telling what happens. And it's not all left on the narrator. Like, everyone else can pitch in. This is sort of a very open, low consequences environment where, I mean, there is consequences, but there's not a narrative weight to the things that happen. But the catch, I mean, there is a narrative weight because you can pull on these, pull on the ideas, the thoughts. I had one session where we discovered mushroom folk, and they interacted with the community of mushroom folk, and that entire montage was all about the mushroom folk. Like, and I totally didn't plan that at all, and that just ended up being a stop on the map now. And that you can kind of control, and as a narrator, you can kind of control and modulate that. One thing to note before you start is like a base energy cost to say, so when we started, every player that was doing a action paid 2 energy for that action. So if you had an ability score, you'd reduce the cost for that action. So you're sort of incentivized to use your discipline and use your ability scores to your advantage, but you don't have to. And then in addition, you lay out consequences. You could say on a judgment, this is a level 3 traversal or whatever. So any consequences, just you might suffer. So temperance, maybe just the player suffers, and judgment, all the players will suffer a consequence at -2 or something like that. So when you come out of it, everyone might have taken some damage, whether it's ability, lost a resource, or you can kind of set up that, like, there are losses that happen along the way, or you get battered along the way throughout that adventure. And then, of course, obviously, as you approach a new tile, you could have the players use a heal skill in that montage. So it's very flexible, very open, and wow, I'm getting hot. I need to turn on the air conditioning. So I'm going to leave this demonstration up. I actually need to use the restroom, but we're almost, actually, here, let me see. I'm almost done. So let's just finish up. Then I'll use the restroom, and then I'll actually play some Hyper Light Drifter because I am down to play. It's been a while, and I think I want to do a Alt Drifter game, but maybe I'll just do an NG Plus game. So to demonstrate, party needs to travel through the mountains and investigate the water that stopped flowing. The narrator decides to start a montage for players to get to the mountain, not using a map. The narrator decides each action that will cost 2 energy. The adversity is 2, so both judgment and temperance results will impact the party. Player 1 starts. They want to use nature forecast to find favorable weather. They spend the energy. They roll a terrible judgment, so they decide against spending boosting, but they spend an intervention point instead. So all players take health and energy damage as one of the variants of a level 2 adversity. The narrator explains the player's attempt to read the weather, making a prediction, affects the party later. And that actually could be like sharp rain, a crazy storm, something like that. Hail, or slipping and falling from hail, or from the rain, or wet moss. Player 2 picks fight. They describe, and perhaps the incorrect weather prediction forces them into seek shelter in a ruined facility that was already occupied. This is where the fight action comes into play. And the player says, oh, maybe from the weather, we're going to hide in a cave, and we run into some ogres. And now that we run into some ogres and we fight them off. He rolls, get a fortune result. He could say he slays it's up to him to decide, more or less. I mean, the narrator could kind of poke in there. But they could kill him, they could scare him off, whatever he wants, or show of force intimidate them with his fight skill. Or fights one of them and scares the rest off. So you have a lot of, and then that's a destination for later if they choose to continue delving or come back to later. Combat. Combat is always a feature of most tabletop role-playing games. Yeah, I think it would be capable to run through a combat encounter. So style of play, you have the combat board or you have theater of the mind. This is the combat board. I actually have a better one to show off. The combat board. And so players will start. I want to do this full screen, but okay, whatever. And of course, it's pixeling is imperfect, but whatever. So players will start in any of these 4 tiles. Enemies will start in any of these 4 tiles. And initiative works kind of like D&D initiative. Players will roll initiative, and the enemies have a default initiative. And so the players will roll reflex or awareness, applying boost as they see fit. Enemies have static values to their initiative, and enemies of the same type will typically act on the same initiative order. So if you have 5 Dirks, only one of them will act on their turn, or in groups. So there's a lot less enemy actions that will happen. So it's very much more player focused. When it's your turn, you're allowed to do whatever you choose, but you can do multiple actions in your turn. Each increasing action costs +1 after the first. So the first one's 0 plus whatever the action cost, then the second one's 1, second one's 2 plus, third one's 3 plus. All enemies have a consequence level, which is determined by the symbol, which is related to your ability. Suffering consequences can result in a variety of outcomes, not just damage. And temperance is usually less than the full level. Combat actions. There are a bunch of base actions you can do that you don't have to have slotted because we can't have everything. So activate simple item, get up, reposition, throw explosive item, use restorative, quick dash, last second. Last second's a reaction. Okay. Quick dash. This uses a dash. It's an action. Use restorative. It's an action. Uses energy. 0 energy. So if you use it on your second round or your second action, it would cost 1. Strike. Basic attack. Blast. Basic attack. Buy time. I'm wondering if these will be necessary, but I feel like I have to keep them just so people have an option. By time, this is your way you can recover energy, but you might take damage in the process depending on if you fail your roll. This is a defend action. Full defense, you can gain a pool of points used to reduce damage taken. Heal, obviously an in-combat heal action. An other skill, this is kind of just a catch-all. And then consequences. So consequences are broken out into levels. 1, health, or knockdown. So these are or options. So obviously there's no narrative stuff here, but they would go by the same weight as well. A 5 weight adversity level social action would have heavy consequences, as 5 damage is pretty much half your health, or 1 corruption point. Knockdown plus damage, force, movement. So I try to come up with a mathematical system which would derive. So if you got hit by a Dirk, which are level 2, and got hit with a judgment, they could knock you down or push you. The adversities, so enemies, so like Dirks, for example, health, initiative, so they move at 10. So as long as you roll above a 10 or boost up to past a 10, you will move before Dirks do. They prefer knocking down their targets as a consequence. When it's the Dirk's turn, the narrator will make 1 attack for the entire group. So although your attacks can suffer consequences, you can take damage. When it's the Dirk's turn, no matter how many Dirks there are, only one enemy or one of the players will have to make a defense roll against a Dirk attack. And then depending on which Dirk is attacking and where they are located on the map, they have a ranged and melee attack. And this is to prevent the need for narrator to move Dirks around. They can on the turns and stuff like that, or when a player takes temperance damage or takes a damage. So I'll probably add that to one of the adversities as movement. An ally movement. And then there are variants of that as well. So if you have a large group of Dirks, you can assign groups of 3 and make them a larger bunch of creatures. And then Blade Bots, same thing. You have a melee and ranged attack. And then variants, higher health, higher consequences. We have Warlocks. We have a special action. I'm calling Bloodied. I probably have to swap that out for something more appropriate. And then they have variant abilities as well. These are things that you could pull on as a narrator to make them more interesting or to throw in a twist. Temperance, notice here that there is a... When they attack... Oh, I didn't add that to the Blade Bot. Whoops. That's actually not really necessary. I've been kind of conflicted on that because their adversity level is 4. So when a player defends, it's based on their... Oh, that's what I need to do. So when you roll as a player, you're rolling your combat against this guy. So, for instance, Dirks, they have no modifier to the I should probably keep these up for all of them. Or for at least for combat, for sure, for all of them. So when you're fighting a warlock, such as the bird warlocks in Drifter, and you're attacking it with melee, you would roll a combat roll against your fortune and judgment disciplines. So in this case, we're modifying that by 1. So increasing so your combat discipline, what's listed on your character sheet, would increase this value by 1 for your success. So if you're good at combat, you're still going to have a lower discipline than most, but it's evenly increased by the enemy you're against. Then we have the Drifter, or enemy Drifters, in case they become encounters. And I try to give a little flavor for each of them, for the different types of Drifters. And then advanced options. So this is like breaking up the combat board, line of sight, elevation, difficult terrain, how to represent them, breaking up the combat board, movement, how to do that. That's downtime mechanic. And then as AJ pointed out in one of his tweets is I need to do a retreat option for combat as well, which will be very interesting. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. That is the playtest. So let's run through an action of combat. I actually want to use the restroom first because I've had a lot of coffee and water, and I've been on stream for 3 hours now. So give me 1 second, and I will be right back. Watch this terrible example because I don't have the sprite set up, so scaling and everything is wonk. But let's do it like this. So we have our doggo, our warrior, and let's create a quick character, just so I can have some stats. Finals print. Oops, that's combat board. Character sheet. Click in. All right, so I'm just going to put some arbitrary values here. Or I'll just put 16 for all of them. Since that's a great arbitrary value. Grit 1, nerve, or grit 2, nerve 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. All right. So our doggo warrior has these disciplines, fortune, judgment, and he has, let's go to his abilities. And we're just going to equip him with a light or a medium weapon, a heavy weapon. Where is my... So, quick brief, heavy weapon, 4 damage, and warrior abilities. So we start combat. I'm just going to pull out a d20. And for initiative, he rolled a 4. So I don't want to spend any of his energy. So health, 12, energy, 10, 10, oh, whoops, 12. 12. All right, so I just rolled a 4, and I'm comparing that against my reflex, or my reflex, which is a survival skill. Is it? I think it's a survival skill. Double sanity check here. Disciplines. I want to make sure I'm doing this right compared to what I've used to remember. So reflex is exploration, okay, and then fortitude is survival. My bad. So exploration skill. So I roll against my exploration, which is currently at a 9 for a judgment, 16 for a fortune. So I just rolled a 4. So because it's initiative, I don't have to worry about consequences because it's initiative. So I'm just gonna go at marker 4. Actually, for initiative, I don't even have to compare it against my disciplines. I would only have to compare it against if I'm spending energy. So, bad example. So I roll a 4 reflex, and that's terrible. So the Dirk's going to go first. So the Dirk... Sorry, pages. Adversaries. So the Dirk's going to go first, and there's only one of them acts on their turn. So he has a blaster range 1 and a swipe range 0. I am within range 1. So he can make both. He can make a ranged attack against me, or he can move. Oh, where'd he go? He can move to the tile and make an attack. So in this case, I'm just gonna have him move and make a ranged attack against my doggo, and that's gonna be a defend. That's a combat. So I'm gonna roll a combat, and the Dirk has no combat modifiers. So I'm gonna roll again. I roll a 6 because I'm gonna destroy this dice into ash after this. Or this is one of the playtest dice, so that's probably why. And so from here, the Drifter fail, or I get a judgment result. So that means I'm gonna take the full consequence of damage, because this is, instead of attacking, I'm defending. So a fortune would have made me negate all damage or avoid it. Temperance, I would have taken reduced damage, and a judgment, I would have taken full damage. So he's a level 2 adversity level, and they prefer to knock down their targets. So in the adversity levels, 2 damage or 1 damage knockdown. So I would probably get 1 damage knockdown. I will tap him to apply knockdown. So I am now knocked down. So now it's my turn. So for me, my combat actions. So I probably want to get up. So that's 0 energy in an action. So my first action is going to be getting up, and my second action is going to be attack. So I could just do a maneuver, which would be reposition, which would cost 2 energy. So I can get up with no energy. And reposition for 2. So, character sheet, where are you? There you go. So I got up. I repositioned, so that's 8. And now I want to attack. So that's already a lot of energy use for those 2 actions. So what I probably would rather do is, if I don't have a ranged attack, what I would like to do instead is probably do something like Impale. 0 energy plus dash. So I'm going to use a dash, and I'm going to spend... So I got up, that's 0 energy. And then this Impale was 0 plus dash, so it costs 1 in a dash. So that puts me down to 8, because 0 and then 1 plus 1. And then it uses up one of my dashes. And then, so that means, and with dash, or with this Impale ability, I move 1 tile and then make a fight attack against the target. So, move 1 tile, make an attack against the target. That is a 7, and that's against my disciplines. So, unmodified. God, this dice is terrible. So, I rolled a 7. This is against my combat, so it's below 9. So I have 2 options. I can boost it. Since I have a grit of 2, I can spend 1 energy to get it up to a temperance threshold. So technically I need to... So the logic with these numbers is 8 was the default. So I need to get a 9 or greater to get a temperance. I need to get below a 9 to get a full judgment result. So there's I need to do some clarifications on this. I was trying to do, my first logic was a meet or beat. So you need to meet or beat a 9 to not get a judgment, or meet or beat 16 to get a fortune. So I'm going to spend that 1 energy to get to the temperance threshold. So temperance threshold of Impale is 1 damage and a -1 impact. Oh, and I also took 1 health damage from the first attack. So I'm going to do 1 weapon damage to him, which is 4. So I'm going to do 4 damage to him. So that means he's at half. And then he deals damage to me, but because it's a temperance result, it's a -1 level adjustment. So back to adverse or consequences. That shows... So the Dirk is a level 2, so we're knocking that down to a level 1. So that means he can only do health damage or knockdown. I normally wouldn't do knockdown or secondary effects for reactions, or for taking damage against. So I would do just the 1 damage. So he lost an exchange, or took damage in the exchange with the Dirk. So that puts him down to 6 health. 7. That puts him down to 10 health with that exchange. And then would come to the next action. So let's just go through that. So the Dirk is there. Because it's every other, it's a little more straight and simple. So the warrior will roll a defense save again. He rolls a 6. God, this warrior. Terrible rolls. So he rolls a 6. So he can either spend an intervention point, or he can just take the 2 damage again. Sorry, someone's buzzing me. I'm in the process of buying a house, so I have to double check if anything's important. Okay, cool. All right. So with these terrible rolls, I'm forced to make a decision. Take the damage. In this case, I'm not wearing armor, so damage is not being reduced. So let's just say he does the damage. So we're at 10 right now. He does the damage, 1 damage, and then knockdown again. I'm just being evil. What I could actually just do is do the 2 damage, and let's just do that as a variant of things going on. So the Dirk attacks him, and he takes full damage because he failed. So now it's the warrior's turn again. And he is going... Now he's in range of... let's just go down to combat actions. And then do a strike. This time an 11. God, this dice is terrible. I have not rolled good at all. So 11. So 11 would be comparing against his combat discipline again. So he gets above a 9 and below a 16. So he gets a temperance threshold again for his combat. So he would take 1 damage and deal weapon damage. So he deals 4 damage, which would probably kill the Dirk. Actually, I think the Dirk is at 10 hit points, so the Dirk would be at 2. And then he would take 1 damage. So 10. So this would be 7. And then he spent... I also need to catch the spend on his strike, because he only did 1 attack, so that's down to 6. So you can see energy is going down quickly. And now it's technically the Dirk's turn. The Dirk can either choose to run, sure, why not, or attempt to retreat. That would be one interesting idea. Or he can, for D&D's sake, he'll fight to the death. I roll an 8. So the warrior's defense is 1 off from judgment. I would probably spend the 1 to get it to a temperance. So that's down to 5. Technically as many as you want. I probably would put a soft cap around 4, but I don't want combat to be limited in that degree. I don't think it'll be much of an issue, though. Because also the idea is that there are some abilities that affect entire squares or entire tiles. So everyone on that tile. So if everyone's clumping in, so if the wielder is able to push another person into that tile, I want to allow that because then they get to set up combos. I would maybe put a soft cap at 4 or 5 per tile, because then you can have 1, 2, or here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, that's fairly okay. And then you could even have 1 more in the back, but yeah, 4 or 5 would probably be my soft cap. So, warrior rolls terribly yet again. Now, most warrior loadouts typically include armor, light armor. So, most of this damage he probably wouldn't have had to suffer anyways. But, so, he fails. So, he would take 2 damage, which puts him down to 7. And then let's do the warrior action. Let's do another basic strike. 15. So now he has a choice of, does he want to boost it? So 15. 16 was his threshold. He just has to meet or beat 16 to get a full success. The thing is that the Dirk is almost dead. So the decision is, do I spend an energy to get a full success and not take any damage, or do I want to not spend any energy and take 1 damage? Now, I'm wearing armor, so that would technically be negligible, but I didn't state that in the beginning, so I'm just running without wearing armor. And this was me pretty much rolling 8 or like 6, 4 times in a row with terrible rolls. And no allies. But still, you have a sizable amount of health. And so, for instance, if another Dirk was on the field, for example, and so this is where like combat balancing comes really big. So like for one instance, I'm just noticing now is strike being weapon plus 2 damage. The dash attack didn't feel as powerful as it could have been. So something about damage balancing that I need to keep going. Oh yeah, smart strategy can definitely compensate for poor rolls. Because also now, like, I'm in this situation. I have 4 energy. What if there are more people on the field? Combat settings, mess with the board. Actually, what I really need to put into is an aggro mechanic. Like a paladin, like a 4E paladin mechanic. Not that the enemies can attack anyone else, like it would be their choice, but that their next attack would have to be that player, so that they can be a damage soak, which would be really interesting. 4E really kind of botched, I think, tanking in the sense, because there was no logical way that the enemy could attack anyone else without suffering massive consequences. So just by making it in this open-ended system where they have less freedom, defaulting that next attack to be guaranteed against the tank or aggro, I think that would be really interesting. So for instance, now that I'm low on energy, what I probably would want to do is, where are you? Combat actions, there you are. I want to buy time. So on my action, I want to spend 1 energy. So 3, or no, actually I already spent it, I think, but that's fine. And I'm gonna roll a defend. I rolled an 11, so that's temperance, and I'm gonna recover 3 energy. And I take 1 damage of health in the process. So there's a little bit of tweaking that needs to be happened on combat balancing. The fact there are a bunch of options and decisions that come during combat is more interesting compared. Yeah, exactly. And so, like, that's where also the slotting abilities comes in huge too. So you don't have to worry about slotting by time or heal or blast and strike. Like, those should be options for you. The biggest options I want you to have is what awesome shit you can do when you want to. So, multi-shot, cleave, strategic positioning. The idea that you could say, hey, I want my allies to move. Like, for here, like, put yourself in a position to strike either by helping an ally to safety or putting yourself in the path of danger. Deal weapon damage, and you can move 1 ally a tile at no additional cost. So there's things like, oh yeah. And so there's things like, oh, if I'm attacking a guy, I get a 16, that's a fortune. So now I can deal damage, and now I can move an ally somewhere away. Oh yeah, it's definitely a speed chess game. One thing I'm considering... Yeah, so the one tricky part is always energy cost. That's like the one... And, I mean, low level, it makes sense. Things are limited. And you have to choose what you want to spend your energy on. And, like, as you can tell here, like, even after doing a defense action, what I might want to do now is actually take another defense action. Because that would cost me... So that was just my... So it's on my turn, I can take more than 1 action. So I could technically do 2 defensive actions. I got a 6. God, this guy's going to be having a horrible time. No wonder why this character's going to die. And I got a judgment, so recover 1 energy and take 2 damage. So what I might want to do is that already right off the bat feels too punishing. So, because 1 energy doesn't do anything about this. So right off the bat, here, let me actually open up the game design document. Oh, very much so. I've actually been considering getting minis to an extent, or like going forward with minis. But that should be a Kickstarter of its own. Oh, God. So let's go to buy time. Oh, and this is what I mean about like reworking the class pages. Because each spread is going to be a class, so I don't need multiple pages for abilities. So I'm reworking a ton of stuff right now. Oh, wait. Other actions are farther down. And so everything got messed up, too, in the long run. There they are. Enhance. Magnify. Oh, yeah. And it kind of is. A stim is another action. Throw explosives, reaction, activate, repossession, get up. Blast, full defense. Buy time, here we go. So what I'd probably do here is make buy time recover 2 energy, recover 4 energy, recover 5 energy. So even just from that, like a quick run with it, like, and then should buy time cost energy? Right now, I would say no, and I could probably leave these values the same. 4, 3, and 2. So that way, when you spend the action, you might take damage or something might happen. And that's the thing, too. Like, in the PDF, like, we have things like adversities, consequences, where we don't have it for level 2 consequences, but level 3 consequences is summon, like, minions. And I actually might downgrade these to lesser level minions. So summon 2 level 1 minions. So the idea is like, oh, even though I failed a roll, maybe I'm not taking damage, but now we're introducing 2 other enemies to the combat board. Higher. So having an energy cost for buy time. Yeah, I'm sort of open to it right now. Yeah, right now I left it with the increased energy cost. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong document. Because the idea is if you're running out of energy, you don't want to spend energy. Let me do 5 and 6. That way it's a lot more... It's a meaningful action that provides a good amount of recovery. But you can still take damage. So I remember you mentioning gaining features from other classes. So would eventual character improvement just be gaining new classes if corruption? So what that is with... So with the character sheet, that's not the character sheet anymore. With the character sheet, you will have talents, and you'll have access to talents from your... You have access to all talents, but you can only slot 2, or you can slot as many of the discipline you are specialized in. So warriors can slot as many combat abilities, versifiers can slot as many social abilities, wielders can slot as many manipulate abilities as they see fit, but you can only slot 2 of your non-specialized. So as a warrior, I can only slot 2 manipulate abilities. So I can add features from other classes, but I'm still limited to how much I can slot them. One way of going around that is the advancements, the advancement paths. So one of the advancement paths that we're thinking of doing is you would increase the number of slots for non-specialized. So if you're a fighter, if you're a warrior and you take a advancement path, maybe one of its boons or bonuses or things you can do is unlock or increase the number of manipulate talents that you can have. So instead of 2, it's now 3. And then in addition, it would have its own abilities too that you can have. So like the Beastmaster or Swordmaster, for instance, I would probably have an increase of 1 combat. So increased sword weapon should be weapon damage. in addition to that, it would increase a combat. How many combat discipline slots that you can have, or combat abilities you can have slotted. Also, I hope any future warrior that fights a Dirk does not roll as terribly as I did in this example. Because, you know, the best way to roll is to really roll. Let the fate of the dice show. But that's also the interesting thing. As the narrator, the only thing I had to really worry about was if I had to move a Dirk and who it was attacking. And what damage effect happened from it. Outside of that, I didn't have to make rolls. I didn't have to make a decision about like what spell. I mean, there is some special abilities I can choose from, but they're just 2 to 4 choices as well. So I don't have to worry about like deciding who's attacking who, how many people are where. It's very straightforward in that. But yeah, that's Hyper Light Drifter, the tabletop role-playing game. In playtest and feedback wanted. 4.3 is going to be one of the biggest reworks. 4.0 was also one of the biggest reworks, but 4.3 will be a big rework in terms of the ability slotting. In addition, we're looking at putting an opportunity to have your weapon slots or weapon augments, your armor augments, and stuff like that, or a place to record that, because there's no real place for that or like listed place. So it would be like weapon, armor, and then like you can put underneath that an augment or something like that once you get an augment. And I envision those being as cards. So like your abilities here, they'd be cards you'd like slot in. And then obviously for the PDF, I need to make it so you can type them in. And then, yeah, it's coming along. Looking good. Obviously could use some more illustration, but yeah. But I am happy to talk more about it as I hop into Hyper Light Drifter. Also, hex map. This looks so dope. I love it. All right. Boop, boop, boo. I wonder if my head will be in the way. Or should I make my head smaller? Or crop it, at least. Let me see if I can do that. Whoop. Crop. Hide, transform, properties. Put. There we go. Oh, wait, is the audio off too? Nope. All right, shall we play New Game Plus, Alti, or Classic, or the Boss Challenge? I am fine with all. I am not a speedrunner, but I can run this game quite speedily because I've run it a few times now, just a few. And also, if you've never played Hyper Light Drifter, stay and watch. Like, this is a beautiful ass game, and I think even just watching a little bit will provide a lot of inspiration to how you can approach the tabletop game. Boss Rush? All right. I thought I unlocked the other modes, but I think because I uninstalled it and then reinstalled it, it like cleared it. I don't know. All right. I think this is Crystal Guy. Oh, you get all guns. That's interesting. Oh, wait, no. Give me my shotgun. Alrighty. I am not warmed up. Well, okay, I'm a little warmed up, but not that warmed up. Okay, not that warmed up. Oh, you missed it? No, don't. All right, boom. Ow, ow. Ah! Ow! Ah! I forgot about that. I got my dash timing off. There we go. Alright, what's the next boss? I actually don't know where they are, so... I guess I'll just go left to right. Alright, let's get the next guy. Oh, I love this Hierophant. And the music is just... Ow! Ow. There we go. Nice. Bum 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 bum. As I said, I've only played this game a few times. Oh. I love that boss. That's probably one of my favorites. New Game Plus, so much harder. Oh my god. My last run was New Game Plus, so I'm like kind of surprised at how easy they are. Or how easy they're in regular. Oh god. Ow. Oh. Oh, he died to that. No! Ah! Oh, they're actually somewhat regionally located. That's interesting. Because he's the east, he's the north. Ah, I didn't even think about that. Huh, that's interesting. So then these are all the... I'm surprised I'm doing this well. Oh, yeah, sorcerer. Ow. Oh god. This one I can't dodge. Ow. Ow. But I got him. This guy is super hard on NG+. Because you can't touch any of his balls. Because they just kill you outright. Oh, the music. Oh, love it. As I said, I've only played this. I love this one. Hello, my friend. This guy made me jump so hard. That was very clean. Oh, bam. There we go. That was a very clean fight. I had one run where I didn't get the VOD, but it was such a clean fight. It was on NG+, too. Wait, what the? Froggo! Bam. Oh, ow. Bum, 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 bum. Let's grab a health. Next one. Archer. Whew. Oh, I don't have energy. Ow! Hatman. Oh, interesting. I was wasting my energy and I didn't have enough to do any spin dashes on him. Hey. Ow, ow, ow. Die! Okay. Alrighty, let's move on to the last one. Ah, there it is. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Ah, I missed. Ow. Ow. Forgot he explodes. Ah, no, I messed up. I messed up. Oh, I love that. Come on, my dude, come on. Ow. Ow! There we go. And whoop. Pam. Oh, he's so fun, though. 9 minutes. That wasn't bad. Mid-range. Here's where I'll struggle a lot. Or wait, what's the conditions of mid-range? Deflect. And dash. All right. And watch as this game gets increasingly harder. No, ah. Ow, no, I just want to kill your friend. Ow. Ow. Hey, what do you know? It reaches. There we go. Whew. Also, thank you everyone who showed up to stream. I know viewers dropped a little bit, but I hope you enjoy Hyper Light Drifter, and if you have any more questions, feel free to ask, because I'm just chilling now. I'm probably just going to play through this, maybe the hardest method, and then call it a day, because I got design stuff to do. Oh god. Ah! Oh, I didn't have the spin slash, that's why. I was like, I'm holding X, why is he not dying? I can imagine some of the bosses being enemies in the TTRPG. I could imagine combat abilities of each of them. Yeah, I know, right? Because you have, like, the guy who can do 3 slashes and affect tiles. As a West boss, he can attack multiple tiles by jumping between them. You have this guy who can throw things to tiles that require players to either dodge or get out of the tile. Ow. Ow. I'm still not used to plinking. There we go. You have the Hierophant who can just summon damage on each of the tiles. So there's a lot of cool little interesting mechanics you could do for each of the regions. Hello, friend. Ow. That was not how I expected that to go. Ow. Whoops. Ow. Heal. I'm just gonna dodge this. Ow! Oh, I can't. There we go. Oh, yeah, that would be really cool. Or just like 2 tiles or something like that, just to make it so they can move around. Because essentially... Or, yeah, all tiles except 2. And the other thing, too, is that you can have it so the players know about it before their initiative comes. So you could say all of these tiles except for the middle one will take damage or have to roll a reflex or something like that. At a difficulty 4, difficulty 5, or whatever. Oh, yeah. Hello, my dude. Ow, ow. Ow. Ow, ow, ow. Dodge, dodge, dodge. Ah. And that was one of the reason why we wanted to, like, add the option of breaking up the board, because... There we go. Whew. Yeah. Yeah, as part of the public rules, I probably want to stat the core bosses or something like that, and then leave the rest of them for the full game. There we go. It's still nice to have health. Also love the skid. That's always so fun. Ow. Nah, I'm focusing too much on the mines. I probably only need to get rid of 2 mines, honestly. Ow. There we go. Wow, am I gonna have a better time on this one? Whee! Ow. Yeah, so that's been one of the tricky ones, actually, the cape and stuff like that, the outfits. I'm not sure whether to consider that armor or just like a buff that the players can get, like an augment, like an armor augment or something like that. Yep. Yep. Yee. Ow, ow, ow. There we go. 920. Ooh, that's really close. Naked boss rush. Oh no. All right, everyone. I think I'm gonna call this a close. I've been on for 4.5 hours. I just want to thank everyone for stopping by, listening to me talk about the mechanics and explaining the mechanics. I hope it was interesting, or at least informative. If you guys haven't picked up the Hyperlight Drifter playtest, the basic rules are on our website, metalweave.game or metalweave.com/games. I'll put that in the chat. Games/drifter. Oops, I can't spell it right. Metalweave.game/drifter. There we go. And there you can find the playtest. You can find the link to the backer kit if you guys want to pre-order. We have a Discord community. And if there's anything else, I will be here. I will be fielding questions. I'm on the Discord all the time. So have yourselves a wonderful Saturday afternoon. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Black Lives Matter. And take care. Have a good night. Have a good day, everyone, and take care.